Time being 7:01, I call to order the Franklin School Committee meeting. Meetings are recorded by Franklin TV and shown on Comcast Channel 9 and Verizon Channel 29, as well as recorded by Franklin Matters. At the conclusion of our meeting, we will be adjourning to executive session and will not be returning to open meeting. So we have a pledge of allegiance. So we have a pledge student tonight. Franklin Middle School is proud to recognize 3 outstanding Franklin Middle School students who serve as our Project 351 ambassadors: Madeline Sampson, Cameron Ether, and Olivia Parker. These students were selected because they truly embody the values of Project 351: leadership, service, humility, and a strong commitment to the community. Over MLK Junior Weekend, they represented Franklin Middle School at Project 351 launch day, joining student leaders from across Massachusetts to begin a year focused on civic engagement and service to others. The adults in our building consistently describe Madeline, Cameron, and Olivia as students who lead by example. They're thoughtful, inclusive, and dependable. They're students who look out for others and take pride in contributing positively to our school community. They model the values we hope to see in all of our students. We're excited for the leadership and service that they will bring back to Franklin Middle School throughout the year.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And now I'll have a moment of silence as is customary. Thank you. Go lightly, this is the perfect time. First up, we have routine business. Payment or review of agenda. Does the agenda look good to everyone? Excellent. Payment of bills. Callahan? Bills in order. Sounds good. Payroll. Look good. FHS student reps. Assuming since we don't have school, they took the night off.
If anyone didn't know, it's been a bit of a disjointed week, so the students are here this evening to share an update. But I do have some updates for you, Dr. Griffin, if you're ready.
Please do.
Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I wanted to begin by thanking our Franklin Public Schools community for your flexibility during the recent stormy weather. And our Department of Public Works worked throughout the day and overnight at each of our school sites, clearing snow, ensuring safe conditions for reopening, and we are fully prepared and good to go for tomorrow. I wanted to also give a special shout out to our custodial team who have worked to clear our walkways, entrances, and staging areas along the schools and outside the building, and to the school and district administrators who were working behind the scenes and for their efforts on site today. And we're very grateful for all the work that happened during the storm. Once again, this was a large amount of snow that came down. Keeping up with it was a challenge, but ultimately the second round of snow presented an even greater challenge after they plowed to get the bulk of the first storm out of the way. They need rest, they need to pivot to getting the areas cleaned, and today was really in order to receive students and staff safely and appropriately. We needed to call the day just to make sure, and they spent the better part of today cleaning up. If you drove around any of the school sites, you would have seen all the equipment and the machines, and we're thankful for the work that happened there. Jefferson Elementary School recognition. This was the blue ribbon recognition that was put out before the 20th. Since then, I wanted to follow up because I had the extreme privilege and honor of attending the National Blue Ribbon Nominee Award ceremony that was held at the State House by the Mass Department of Education. As you know, the National Blue Ribbon program was eliminated in this about probably 3 months ago in this presidential decision, but ultimately Massachusetts continued with that program and did a nice job honoring all the schools that were selected. So this is for Jefferson Elementary. They were honored on the 20th, and the ceremony was hosted by the Commissioner of Ed And it was also just a tremendous opportunity and highlighted the excellence across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We're fortunate to live and be in a state that has such a strong education when we think about the country. And Jefferson was one of only 6 schools statewide that were nominated for this distinction. And to be clear, this represents the highest level of recognition within the state's system. So the school was recognized for exemplary high-performing school category, reflecting sustained excellence in English language arts and mathematics, as well as strong outcomes for all students, including students with disabilities and English learners. And the state specifically cited Jefferson's strong curriculum, data-informed instruction, and deeply collaborative and inclusive teaching practices that ensure access to grade-level learning while maintaining a strong sense of community. And while the school's physical location has shifted as part of the district reorganization, the instructional practices and the culture that earned this recognition continues across the Franklin Public Schools. And this fall, the vast majority of the students who attended Jefferson transitioned to the Washington Street K-2, 3-5 school. And we're just extremely proud. And we wanted to recognize the leadership of Principal Stephanie Wasick, who is the current Washington Street K-2 principal and was the former elementary principal at Jefferson Elementary, and assistant principal Beth Murray, who is currently one of our math specialists at Washington K-2, and the dedicated team of educators, our students, and our families who made that achievement possible. Next, I'd like to share some positive news of the innovative work coming out of the Office of Teaching and Learning. The Franklin Public Schools launched the Franklin Learning Institute, a district-based adult learning model that offers and bundles high-quality professional development opportunities designed with and for Franklin educators. The work reflects a thoughtful approach to professional learning and is another strong, purposeful use of the Pond Street site. The Institute is launching with 2 initial offerings. SEI, Empowering Multilingual Learners One Strategy at a Time, which supports educators working with multilingual language learners and fulfills the SEI professional development requirements set by the state for licensure, and the Mentorship Journey, Building Strong Beginnings, which supports educators mentoring new teachers and aligns with the state's expectations around mentoring programs that exist at each school district. Both workshops are free to Franklin educators with strong early interest, and limited seats will be open to neighboring districts on February 2nd. I wanted to recognize Dr. Rogers and her team, Eric Stark and Lizzie Morrison. As an academic institution that's focused on teaching and learning, it's impressive to see what a small group of focused team members can accomplish in collaboration with our schools, and this is strong evidence of innovation, impact, and investment in our educators. The next announcement is around the calendar update, so I'll pass it over to you, Dr. Rogers.
Sure. Thank you. If I may, can I add one comment on the Franklin Learning
Sure.
Institute? I just want to recognize that our 2 facilitators are our internal amazing educators, one being Dr. Amanda Goddard, who's one of our EL teachers, and the other being Ms. Kim Taylor, who's our ECDC principal. So very excited to have them as our first facilitators. Just an update to the committee and the community at large about our school calendar for the next school year. So we are underway of creating that calendar. We are working really hard to make sure that any half days that we have are very strategically placed, thought about, and planned for. And as a result, we are anticipating a reduction of about 25% as it relates to half PD days connected to professional development. So we will still have our typical half days for conferences, but those additional days for professional development. So the community can expect that as we're strategically planning. In addition, we plan to send a survey out to the community and to staff to get some input on specific aspects of the calendar, so that that can inform kind of some of the decisions that we make about the calendar. So you can expect that update at the next committee meeting.
Thank you. Finally, last announcement, Panther Pride Night. This is a reminder that Franklin High School will host Panther Pride Night on Thursday, January 29th, from 6 to 8 p.m. This event is designed for 8th grade students and their families to learn more about Franklin High School's academic programs, athletics, clubs, extracurricular opportunities, and much more. Families should have received information by email, and additional details are available on the Franklin High School website. This concludes my update. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the committee?
I apologize if this is covered in what you said.
if it was, I didn't fully understand. What, how are you handling the professional development needs with the reduction in half days? Is there just going to be less PD overall, or how is it moving around?
So we are trying to be very strategic with our time. So that's kind of the purpose of doing more survey work, to really be honed in on the actual needs and then be strategic as well about time we have during the day, and as well as our after-school meetings that would not impact families. So trying to think through that larger scope,
Yeah.
just because we've heard from the community.
Yeah, very good, thank you. I was going to acknowledge that, that we've heard, I mean, even on the campaign trail, some people came to it and said, can you do something about the half days? Well, might not be a priority, but we'll see what we can do. And I think just showing the community that our administration's hearing it, 25% reduction is really impressive. So thank you for being attuned to that and looking at what our options are. That's all.
Yeah, so just wanted to talk about the snow day transition from the delay to the full day off. Can you kind of elaborate on like the timeline of events and how that came about?
Yes. So originally, last night, we saw the end of the first storm occur. I was in touch with our DPW. We anticipated there'd be another round, but depending on which weather report you watch, some said it would be, I saw 1 inch to 1.5 inches, and then I saw others that said 1 to 3. So we were waiting until the morning. The purpose of the delay was twofold. One, if it was light and we just needed to clean up, it would give 2 hours just to make sure our lots were set. If we had more than that, it would give me time to move from a delay to a cancellation and not have to make the call, have enough information in the morning to have a full assessment done of the conditions in each of the schools. So that's where we led to that transition. You may have noticed other districts, some canceled last night because they already knew they didn't have the staff. Some said 2-hour delay because they communicated with their DPW and they felt like they could do it. And then some did pivot in the morning to change based on, it really was a coin flip. If it was 1 inch of snow, it could have just been a scrape and move, and that might have been feasible. But given the amount and where to put it, we had dump trucks on site where they were actually loading snow so that we could create more parking spots. So I think those all factored into the decision, and it felt most responsible to at least call a 2-hour delay to prepare. And that's what I actually thought we would be able to have school with a 2-hour delay, but it just did not become the reality of what we were actually able to do. And it would have felt irresponsible to just move forward with the 2-hour delay given the conditions. I think it would be a different conversation tonight if we had school. And by the end of today, it definitely was a different state. And that's the other reason why we didn't cancel after-school activities, because if I was thinking reasonably, now the 2022 version of Superintendent Jagir might have just said everything's canceled and very kind of robotic on when you cancel all, you have to. I think after a few years of living this, I've realized, like, what's the practicality? It's really about the storm is over, now it's about cleanup, but can we be in a good place by the next set of programs? And it seemed after school was an area where we could keep the jazz concert tonight, which my son is playing in. We could keep any types of practices and games that were happening, and then we could also look at ski club, which did run at the high school and the middle school today. Great day, it's probably the most skiing is probably perfect. And is it?
Snowing.
And it's snowing now, so that's just a little bit of a debrief on kind of the decision making. Thank you for asking the question.
Yeah, no, it's one of those things with snow days, there's always the whole Monday morning quarterback, like, which way could you have gone?
I'm aware.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like the first time you had called a snow day. So yeah, you can't win.
Still living,
Yeah.
I'm still living that one down.
But I mean, from the little that I was able to get around town this morning, I think it was the right call. I think the only suggestion or feedback that I would make, I think from a communication standpoint, we could have done more, because I felt like there were some places that we normally communicate that it didn't come out with this. So I think just looking back to see, which avenues may have been missed, just so that the next time it happens that we hit those, because I was literally like shuffling, and it was my AirPod, got the text like, "You want me to read this text?" I was like, "What is it?" And then I got inside and told my son, he's like, "There's really a snow day?" And then he asked my wife, and she's like, "I don't know." And then like, so we had to look for it. So like, I feel like just maybe looking at the.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see like which which ways worked for people and which didn't. So I'd love to know if you have a specific example of like an area.
Yep.
Because I tried to hit on, when we, in that system, it allows me to do an email and a text at the same time.
Yep.
Then I go back in and I can do an alert that goes to Facebook, the website live feed, and the app as a notification. So, and then I email all staff, just I copy and paste it in and send it out, and I blind copy you all on certain things. I'd be curious to know like which mechanism's missing, because I do, and I do let the TV, everyone likes to see it on the TV still. So I try to get that, I do that after, so there's those mechanisms, but I'm open to hearing where there could be areas to improve. I don't know of any with the tools we have, but I'm certainly open to
Yeah,
it.
the only suggestion I would say, at least given the nature of the change, maybe like a phone message.
That's actually-
that was the only
yeah.
one I think that missed, and I don't know if I saw it on Facebook, but I think.
So like a phone call could be read, I learned the hard way when it read the 4-minute message, but I think there's a way to have it read the text message.
Yeah.
So maybe we can look at that for next time,
Yeah,
makes sense.
yeah.
Thank you, I needed more details, so that's helpful.
Cool.
Steven?
First of all, on the same note, right? So earlier we used to get the calls, and the call
Yeah.
will say, hey, today is an off day. And we got the message and email, but we didn't check it. But my son got the notification from his friend, and he was like, Dad, it's a snow day. So that's how I came to know the snow day.
You had to check, because you didn't want, like, are you sure?
That's why.
Pull one over.
I'm sure, I know. Did
Yes,
But
yes.
anyway, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for the
Yep.
update. And thanks to all the Public Works Department and custodians for clearing the snow continuously and keeping the roads clean. So then we were able to at least move around the town. Thank you for all the work that you've done. One question I had on professional learning. So is this for the existing teachers, or is this for someone aspire to be a teacher?
For the Franklin Learning Institute?
Learning Institute,
It's
yeah.
currently for our Franklin Public School educators.
Educators.
Yes, and then we do plan next Monday, if there's any open seats remaining, to open it to surrounding communities that are part of professional learning organizations with us.
Mhm.
So they'll open it to their staff on a first come, first served basis.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, appreciate all the effort and the communication. I know that there were some differences in how people were able to get the information today. I do know some notifications went to spam folders, so I would just ask anyone who had that experience, make sure that you add us to your safe sender list, prevent that in the future. And then I think, phone call can definitely be helpful. Just again, as many different ways as
Yep.
possible, but there's always going to be little challenges. The other thing is, I do know that in some instances, there were follow-ups from the individual schools. I think that was definitely helpful, to make sure that people knew, like, great, in case you missed the ones that came out, this morning, in case you missed the text, here's another round. Some of those came out real late, like 10:30, 11 o'clock. So let's just kind of making sure that, I think it's a great idea to have that follow-on like an hour behind, so anyone who happened to miss it gets a second chance at it, but just making sure that those still hit on time would be critical.
Thank you.
And then Dr. Rogers, just the one question I had about the 5-day, or the decrease of 25%. That does not include 5 days that we had at the end of the year, right? We're not, this isn't just like a show.
We are not including 5 days at the end of this year.
Just
With that comment too, because one, as my colleagues mentioned, great, thank you very much for DPW and everybody else. Lucas, when that storm came, I just kind of saw that it was back in the fall. You're right there, and you're like, I'm going down that rabbit hole. I'm on all these different apps, and it's going to be a bad winter. And I was like, this is his fault. But just in terms of the blue ribbon, it's just absolutely fantastic. I want to thank just the state itself for kind of recognizing that and continuing on with that tradition. It was amazing. A big thanks to our state leaders, Representative Roy and Becca Rausch, for being a part of that. And just for the entire Jefferson community as well. The teachers, the students, the families. It is an amazing honor and distinction to be a blue ribbon school. And you all just knocked it out of the park. So thank you all very much. And I was glad that we were able to kind of be there. I saw the pictures. Absolutely fantastic ceremony. So thank you.
Thank you for mentioning. I also want to thank State Rep Roy and Senator Rausch. They both were there at the ceremony. They were present in support of Franklin, and then gave us beautiful certificates with the blue ribbon on them as proclamations. It it was a real nice touch in addition to getting the DESE. And I think from all the districts that were there, we were represented by both the senator and the state rep, which was not common that I could see within the crowd. So it was a nice touch. So it was really well done.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, it looks like we're able to move into presentations. I think we only have one for tonight.
Small.
Just get something simple. Okay. Great? Okay. Okay, we prepared a brief 700-slide presentation. We'll stop around 350 for a stretch. I brought the waters this time, so we're not.
Yeah, the new folks might think that's funny, but we've been.
Okay, so thank you. I'm joined by our amazing school business administrator, Ms. Jana Malati, today to present the budget to you. So tonight's presentation outlines the FY27 recommended budget for the Franklin Public Schools, and the central theme is around maintaining level services through fiscal disciplines, transparency, and strategic planning. And ultimately, it reflects carefully balancing rising fixed costs while also protecting the core programs that we have for students. So that's basically an overview. Tonight, as we begin, the overall context, I want to leave with a few slides that just kind of build context for the budget and kind of where we're at Franklin Public Schools, and ultimately wanted to name a few things. We'll walk through our major cost drivers, we'll talk about the strategies that we've used to build this budget, and particularly the reorganization, the zero-based budgeting approach that we take, and then we'll also review the revenue sources we have, including our revolving funds, our grants, the Chapter 70 formula, and then we'll conclude with the timeline so you can understand and the community will know what comes next after this presentation. The decisions that we make are grounded in our Portrait of a Graduate, and this prioritizes support for teaching and learning, for student well-being, for equitable access to all the opportunities that we offer at Franklin for all of our students. And ultimately, the strategic objectives shown at the bottom, you may recall from the district improvement plans and the presentations that we did where you approved those plans, those are the four main strategic objectives. So this basically is just a slide to create a reminder for the work that we do, why we do it, and what are we centered around and focused on. We're trying to build young human beings that when they walk across the stage and get that diploma, that they're confident, that they have some awareness, self-awareness, I'm still working on that one, that they can communicate effectively, they can collaborate, problem solve, all the things that we all want to see in a family member, a friend, a colleague, someone that we work with, leadership and whatnot. So ultimately, we take these seriously, and I think our goal was to try to build a budget that preserved the core programming that allows us to help build up students. Moving on, so the fiscal landscape has been challenging. It's not anything new to anyone in this room and anyone online, I'm sure. But ultimately, we try to frame, this slide is really meant to try to frame the environment in which we're operating in. So when we think about just the structural deficit, the contractual obligations we have, special education, healthcare, they continue to rise faster than the state aid and local revenue can keep up with. So ultimately, at the same time, we've reduced our reliance on one-time revolving funds, and we've generated approximately $3.2 million in avoided costs that would reoccur or recur annually through the reorganization that we went through last year, and I would say over the last year, yeah, in perpetuity. And this allows us to protect some of our core services within the $81.2 million operating budget request. So the process, just to lay it out, we've tried to work collaboratively, strategically, and really transparently with our cost center leaders, our school building leaders, our district staff, and try to create a process where we look at our assumptions that we know we can anticipate in this budget. We look at the constraints we're faced with, just like any budget building that you do, whether it's at home or within a school district or a company. Try to look at the trade-offs on where are the things that we have in the budget serving students best, and where are areas where if they're not, we can make changes to make the best possible educational model we can. And then we try to look strategically at aligning some of these long-term goals and try to create a sustainable budget that we could build for this year and try to be as considerate. We'll get into the details on this, once again, trying to build a little bit of context for you. This slide is really meant to just illustrate a zero-based budget approach. Sometimes we use that word, it's been said, I've said it, but what does that actually mean? And we tried to use a stairwell as an analogy of how this looks, but ultimately trying to look at historically, analyzing our spending from year to year, and just start there. And we tried to look at all the areas within our supplies, materials, expenses, contracts, staffing, and looked at what aligned with the current needs of the students that we have in our buildings today. Then we looked at our classroom level analysis. So you start to look at your enrollment. How many students are in each grade? How many students are on an IEP that require specialized services from a licensed special educator? What do we need for transportation? How many bus riders do we have? All of the things that go into those counseling staff, what do we need to provide? So we look at that every year on an annual basis. We're literally starting from scratch and looking at numbers so that there's no rinse and repeat. It's trying to align the resources. Next, we try to forecast our special education. You hear a little bit more about that tonight from Mrs. Morano. And then we look at our salary projections. So now that we've determined the educators that we need in front of students, and we look at our salary projections, we look at our cost of living increases, we look at the total budget. How do we build this out and calculate that? Healthcare, another big driver we'll talk about. Finally, looking at transportation, as I mentioned already, and then technology, equipment, software, any of the essentials that we need to conduct, just to educate students, whether it's student devices and things like that, or software and materials that an adult would need to interact and do their job, whether they're a teacher, a counselor, a principal, a superintendent. And that's really how we get to the place where we have a budget in front of you that demonstrates and illustrates the increase and why we're asking for what we're asking, and we try to do as transparent and data-driven as possible, as we do every year. Just a brief overview. You've seen this slide before. I won't over speak on it, but ultimately we are educating over 4,327 students across our schools, and we have spent below the per pupil expenditure. We'll talk about that a little bit as we move forward in the presentation. And we've been able to really provide a high quality instruction despite all the challenges by maintaining the services across our levels to the best of our ability. We've had some rough years that have occurred. I think we're at a point with the reorganization where, as I said, we had some cost avoidances this year, but ultimately we've put together a model that we feel as though meets the level services that we have in front of the kids we have in front of us. So I'm going to kick it over to Ms. Malati to talk through some of the details on that.
Yep. So this slide is an overview of our FY27 budget request. We broke out health insurance from our total operating budget request, so you guys can see the breakdown clearly. The operating budget request without health insurance, you can see we were able to keep it at 2.5% increase at $72.3 million. When you look at health insurance, you are looking at $8.8 million increase, a 14% increase over FY26. When you combine those two, you get the total request of $81.2 million, which equals to 3.6% over FY26. This request is driven by foundational needs in staffing, mandated compliance, and operational support.
So when we say level service, that's another term that we sometimes use, and what do we mean by that? So this slide really just tries to illustrate the different areas of when we're talking about providing level services. We're basically saying we are committing to maintaining the same level of services we have in the schools today next year. So that accounts for the costs associated with that. And some have increased, as Ms. Malati just described, for example, healthcare, contractual obligations, and whatnot. So when we look at this, we started with just what are the drivers of a level service budget. First, there's a whole series of compliance-driven costs that are out of our control that are required. And you can see some of them are listed in there that we have in here. And examples are there are state and federal requirements. We have requirements for our health insurance and the increases related to that. Some of our specialized services that we provide are all compliance driven. When we think about core programming, we're an academic institution. We have an obligation to educate our students pre-K through age 22. So that's past grade 12, but up to age 22. And we have students, and we look at how many students can we fit in the classroom, how many, what are the health and safety needs for our kids, what are the materials and supplies you need to be a high-performing educational institute, curriculum that you need to teach as it aligns with the state frameworks. All of these discussions take place. And then we look at our resources. How are we optimizing our staffing to meet those needs? How are we looking to stabilize those class sizes? Looking at the reorganization and looking at efficiencies that we can have to help stabilize our environment. And then we look at collective bargaining and contractual obligations. We talked a little bit already about healthcare. We'll talk again about that later in the presentation and later this evening. But ultimately, these are all things that come into play as we think about level service. How are we providing the same level of service today that we would tomorrow? And then finally, the revenue alignment. We look at the decisions that we make. What can we anticipate from Chapter 70 funding through their formula? We look at circuit breaker. What can we expect to receive for reimbursement? And then we look at every grant opportunity, whether it's a competitive or a non-competitive grant, in order to help supplement the budget and help defray the cost of some of the needs that we have to educate students. You heard about a competitive grant that we had around the innovative career pathways, for example. There are other grants that we received that we'll talk about in more detail, but we're ultimately doing everything we can to try to build a budget that incorporates all these ideas.
Yeah, so you heard from Lucas about what it's required to maintain level services. Now we're just going to review those key drivers, budget drivers. You can see in this graph that the majority of our budget it's related to salary. 68% of our entire budget is salary, followed by special ed tuition at 10.9%. And health insurance costs at 10.1% over FY26. These are costs that are the highest, they're the fast growing in our budget, highest risks, and we do not have any control over it. And also for context, 1% of our total budget request equals to $885,000.
I think the story here too, I would tell, is when we look at the staffing, if you look at this percentage, the blue, the navy blue, it moves across 70, 69, 69, 68. We're hovering. I think sometimes context, sometimes things can be interpreted certain ways or misinterpreted or whatnot, but I think we've been really looking at our staffing model and the percentage of our budget driver, and over the last 4 years, it's been within a two percentage point of stabilized. It's decreased, obviously. We knew we would see some decrease there, but that's one piece that I would mention. And when I look at some of the other cost increases, like health insurance, you can see larger jumps in percentage-wise of how that looks in the cost ratio. You can see in the red there. Okay, so speaking of how we're organized, this is just a reminder of the work that we did to really create financial stabilization, but also reorganizing to right size fit our district based on the schools and the buildings that we had and putting the students that we had in the spaces that we did. And through that consolidating effort, we were able to increase the ECDC capacity across the two buildings, which was an issue dating back to I forgot the name of Mr. Charles, what was the name of that group? Space Needs Study, way back, 5-6 years ago. And leading into the plan that the majority of folks on this committee had voted for around the master plan and the reorganization, which consolidated our 3 middle schools into one. You'll see the elementaries that were 5 K through 5s into basically working at 2 complexes with a K2 and a 3-5. And then we were able to do the cost, as we mentioned, the cost avoidance. It was 3.1 last year. If you think about that estimated to compound, it would be at least 3.2. So these efforts helped us to build the budget we have and reset our foundation. And it's a good reminder as we talk through budget and our requests. So when we talk about staffing, here's an example. I know it's fine print. It will be in the budget book as well, and this is accessible. This will be accessible online to all of the community to look at in more detail if they wish. We shared this last year. These numbers have been updated. But through the consolidation, you'll see the schools that we have. Lincoln K-2, 3 to 5, Washington K-2, 3 to 5, the middle school and the high school. And what we did is we tried to display the average class sizes at this point based on the number of teachers that we have, and we tried to look at that. And once again, our guidelines and our ranges, we tried to keep them within the ranges that we've set as guidelines. These are recommendations, but ultimately looking at 18 to 22 for our youngest learners, your K through 2, and then 3 through grade 12, we look at anywhere between 20 to 25, 24, 25. And ultimately, you can see those ranges. And the middle school teams, you can see the 20 to 24. You can see the high school ranges. It's a little harder with high school because they're not teamed, and ultimately students are enrolled in classes that they take, and you could have multiple grades in one classroom depending on what the course is, but ultimately it's not as simple as doing a chart for elementary, but we try to be as detailed as possible with the information we have. So this is just an example of like the method we go through to try to look at how many adults and how many teachers do we need in front of kids in order to preserve that class size. This comes up, radar. This is the radar. Shout out to Elise Stokes, who showed us this a few years ago. But ultimately, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed has this data. They have ratios and data on a lot of different things. We point this out because according to the DESE radar data, Franklin's staff is below the state average, and the district administration, instructional leadership, and general education. And I thought this just reinforced the decision making. We have, through consolidation, through the work that we've done, and honestly, our budget, and what we've been able to do, I know that we had, in the last few years, we've made reductions as a result of reorg, but we also made reductions as a result of failed overrides. We've had the mix of things, and it's just a wide spectrum. But ultimately, these charts and graphs paint a picture. I think the story here is if you look at them, oftentimes we'll say, okay, you gave us Franklin's information. How does this compare to the state? It's like a reference point. I know that I was interested to see, and many have asked about. So basically, you can see the leadership, the teachers, and paraprofessionals. And when we look at Franklin versus the state, the dark color is your district administration, and you can see Franklin versus the state. The gray boxes are your instructional leadership, and your orange boxes are your school-based leadership, your principal, assistant principal. And then if we look at teachers, you can see the general ed teachers are in gray, and you'll see special ed in orange that I'll speak to in a moment. And then our paraprofessionals versus the state. What this story doesn't tell is we offer a wide range of in-district specialized programs that exist. So Mrs. Morano talked about this in December?
December,
thank you. It
seems like so long.
It does. So in December, when Student Services, Mrs. Morano and her team presented, they shared the wide range of in-district programs that we offer across pre-K through age 22 for our students. And because of that, we staff those programs. So our staffing as it relates, I know when I'm sometimes at meetings with superintendents, we offer a lot of in-district programming, and I think what you might see in a budget line if you would pay to have students go out, and I'm talking budget, not moral obligations here, but from a budgetary standpoint, the cost to educate students outside of the district, when you can offer a program inside, that's where that money would show up on the line. But I think on the state data, when you start thinking about staffing, it's just an important note that I wanted to get ahead of and just share that some of this is related to the programs that we offer and how we're staffed. So wanted to point that out on this slide. You can see the data. Okay.
So as you think about general education as it relates to the operating budget, these are the kind of buckets and categories that we think about as we build a budget from a gen ed perspective. So first being the comprehensive programs and services that we offer. So we listed a few examples here of some newer with our district reorganization. We were able to prioritize a few initiatives, being the block at the high school, intervention enrichments, EL programming, things of those nature. So those types of programming and structure we think about. Additionally, when staffing, that big blue bar that Mr. Jaguar was speaking to, That's where we find a substantial amount of our budget being our core academic teachers, our specialists, our instructional technology teachers, our arts, music teachers, PE, nurses, guidance, administrators, and so on. Then we move into curriculum and instructional resources. When we presented at the last school committee meeting as the Office of Teaching and Learning, we spoke to that curriculum revision cycle and being really thoughtful and strategic about when we are purchasing curriculum, for what durations, and the professional learning that goes with that. So that's another consideration as we think about gen ed. And additionally, building out those tiered supports and the curriculum and resources we have for those. Then, of course, we always like to offer well-rounded opportunities for our students. So what kind of extracurricular clubs, athletics, things like that we offer after school. And finally, the big yellow buses as part of the gen ed operation budget. So both to get students to and from school, but as we think about equitable access to after-school opportunities, and if we're able to offer, based on our budget, those late buses, particularly from the high school and the middle school for clubs, athletics, things like that.
Yep.
Special ed. So as you know from our presentation back in December, as well as what Mr. Giger just shared, the Franklin Public Schools is committed to delivering high-quality special education services that are really responsive and tailored to the evolving needs of our students within the district. As you know, one of our big things is expanding our specialized programs. By keeping students in district, not only does it offer the opportunity for them to be educated with their neighborhood peers and siblings, but also it is much more cost effective to keep the students in district. However, the number and complexity of our students' needs within the district can change monthly and annually, so it is a constant moving target. And it just really reflects the nature of the students' needs and what we need to provide for the students. My favorite slide, your favorite slide, everybody's favorite slide. Okay, special ed costs. So the top chart really gives you the historical perspective of what our out-of-district costs are. So as just one quick education of people, in case you didn't tune into the presentation in December. So when we cannot educate our students, meet the needs of our students within the district through our specialized programs or in-district programming, there are some students who really require that more specialized programming in the smaller environment, in more, like I said, specialized environment, which would be our out-of-district students. So as you can see, the numbers have really fluctuated from year to year, but about the same, right? So, you know, we started 22-23 with 81, we decreased a little bit, 23-24, we went up a little bit last year, and right now we're running about 77. But I can tell you already that number is changing with constant conversations we're having at our building level as well as the district office. But you can see the cost and how much the percentage change to our budget from year to year. So not only is it the number of students that we send out of district, but also the tuition costs. If you remember back in, that was what, 24-25, we had the 14% increase for tuition, right? So that really impacted our budget that year. For next year, what we're hearing is going to be 3.04%. Correct? So it's not as much. And also, you know, there's ancillary services, right? So we have one cost for tuition, but if students require related services such as speech and language or vision services or occupational therapy or any other types of specialized services, those are added costs. A number of our students require one-to-ones out of district. Those are added costs. So just because the tuition is one rate, it doesn't take into account the additional costs that sometimes the district has to pay to support the students the way they need, right? Then we have our in-district versus out-of-district costs. We've all seen this back in December as well as last year. This year I added a column for out-of-district costs per pupil after a circuit breaker reimbursement. So John will go into more detail in upcoming slides about circuit breaker. But basically we get reimbursement, 75% reimbursement above a threshold amount. So the threshold for last year was $53,431. So, example, if the student's tuition is $50,000, we can't claim them, right? We didn't meet threshold for the tuition costs. However, if the tuition was $55,000, we could get 75% of the $1,569. Okay, so that's how much, 75% above the threshold. Now, we do get reimbursed for those one-to-ones that I spoke about. We do get reimbursed for transportation. We do get reimbursed for if a student requires a nurse. So all of those things we take into consideration. I have to give a shout out to my business specialist in my office, Lynn Lounsbury, who is amazing, who spends basically the whole month of July doing this, right, for us so that she can calculate how much reimbursement we get. We do have a few, just an adding thing, we do have a few students in district who do meet threshold with the amount of services we provide for them. So we do have a few students that we can collect circuit breaker on who are in district as well. So again, anyone who meets that threshold.
I think that's a good example, Mrs. Varner, too, of just the work that's happening behind the scenes and the level of detail to try to take advantage of every opportunity to get any reimbursement, even for students in district that could qualify. The work happening to try to make that happen is happening.
Right, so what we do is we really educate our team chairs on how to write the IEPs, because we have to have certain staff members' roles delineated defined within the IEP to get that reimbursement. So
backwards planning that
yes.
has to happen during the school year.
And we've learned year after year after year of how to do that. So.
Thank you. So this slide, I could have done it when we showed the example of the staffing with the grid where you saw the classroom teachers and the number of students that we have in each grade. But ultimately, every year when we talk about this how do we identify our annual staffing and what do we need? We review it, we look at the resources, we look at our student needs, and that's how we put together the staffing model. So we use data, we look at enrollment program needs. The other thing we look at is around just the configuration of our instructional model across schools. We're now reorged into, we have 2 K-2s. We have 2 3-to-5s. We have 1 middle school and 1 high school. So when you, and an ECDC, that's 1 school but across 2 campuses, right? So in the past, when we had 5 K-to-5s, we had 6 at one point, it was a different structure and we had to work within. We're now looking at what are the needs K-2 and what are the needs 3-to-5. Last year was a tremendous effort to get where we are now today. And if you think about the timing a year ago, December, we did this on January 28th. I remember that date because we had to notify staff prior to presenting to all of you the impacts. The flip side, the good side of presenting a budget this early, which this is the second year Franklin Public Schools has done it, is to get the information out, get our process as a school vetted, allow you opportunities to vet us line by line, which is coming up, and go through a full process so that we have it timed right for the bigger budget process that takes place across the entire town. The flip side of that is some of the decisions and communications that still would need to happen are unfolding. People the next position is a reallocation of positions. If we were to make decisions on reallocating FTEs and whatnot, those are all decisions and communications that have to happen internally with folks that are impacted before any type of public conversation happens. At this stage tonight, we're not getting into that level of detail with the public or the community because we need to continue to look at that process and vet that out. What I will say is we go through the budget, in order to get to an approval, we have to get there and get through that. So when we look at this, the other thing to consider is natural attrition considerations. There are times where someone retires and we've determined that based on the number of students that we are educating, maybe we don't need to fill that position. So that's an example of a reduction that happens through attrition, right? Resignations, we look at those. So I just think when we do our staffing, we try to look at it year to year, case by case, and make the best decisions. And I feel confident in the process that we undergo in order to make that happen. Last year was a very extreme example because it was connected to reorg. We've also had multiple Junes where we've had failed override outcomes that have resulted in cuts that need to be communicated before June 15th. So when I think back, if you've been paying attention or you've been around prior to the last 3 years, we had a budget cycle that didn't result, it had enrollment-based reductions. That just by sheer number of less students, you need less people, and that just happened annually as part of like normalizing how districts function. based on the number of kids you're accepting and how you build a budget. I think we have been living in the last 3 years in a very different space as we've navigated. But I just want to point out, this year, as we've built the budget, it's taken into consideration all the areas that you see listed on this particular slide.
Yeah, so the next few slides will go over detailed information about our requests and our revenues. Our salary increase is $1.1 million and is driven entirely by contractual obligations. Total expenses increase, it's at $654,000, and it represents a strategic adjustment to make sure that we fit into that 2.5% guideline. So this slide shows you detailed information about our salary lines. It provides you with the breakdown by school and department, showing the total salary at request at the bottom at $60.3 million. Most departments in red saw an increase due to steps and lanes, contractual obligations like I mentioned, and while the Franklin Middle School and Lincoln Street Grade 5 Elementary saw slight decreases. You can see them highlighted in green. Now this slide talks about the expenses side of our request. The bottom line, you're looking at about $12 million request, which represents a $654,000 increase. You can see everything that's in green represents decreases. Major increase in departments, you can see our student services at 8.2% and transportation at 6.8%. Both of which are tied to contracts and legal mandates. Okay, now we will review and talk a little bit about health insurance. You can see health insurance is a major pressure point in our budget. The request is about $1.1 million and it represents 14% over FY26. We are in discussions with the town administration to move this line item into the town's health benefits line, Department 910, just to improve forecasting and eliminate duplicate accounting across departments. This proposed shift, it's a strategic move for municipal efficiency, and by unifying health insurance management under the town, we create smarter budgeting and more predictable financial plan. However, this will require a formal vote by the school committee. We do have healthcare costs as a discussion-only agenda that we are going to get to later in the evening.
If I could add context, during the listening sessions last year, this came up as a topic because if you remember, there was the distinction between the operating expenses and the healthcare line merged for the schools creates a higher percentage increase. And I think the confusion is with every other department, every other department has their operational expenses within the department, but their healthcare is all identified in line 910. So what we did last year through the process and hearing that was we started to share, here's our total budget, but if you were to break out operating versus healthcare, we were communicating that way. The discussions have continued. I know there's been expressed interest around exploring this opportunity further, not only from school committee, from the community, from town council, from town administrator, from our team, and really discussing it. So ultimately, that's what we'll talk about later. But just wanted to point out a few things. One, Ms. Malati mentioned kind of the forecasting and central administration. The benefits are run through a benefits coordinator who works within the building, who works with all town employees. And ultimately is doing benefits for the teachers as well, and our educators that we have within our school budget. But the next piece is we're moving to the GIC, which is the state healthcare system. That transition takes place July 1st. So the timing of revisiting this and looking at this as its healthcare line is where this came from, as part of that timing as well. And then I would want to point out that this does not impact the benefits, the staffing, or the collective bargaining agreements or the plan, the healthcare plan itself. So this came up, I know I received an email last night inquiry about this specifically. This is about where it lives within the budget, and ultimately, should it go in with all other healthcare related expenses that are duplicative between the schools and the town. And that's really the discussion point we'll have later, and then ultimately an action that you would take up in future. But we thought it was good to get it out there and talk about it with the committee. So just to, you might hear us repeat some of those thoughts later on. And I know we're trying to not go till midnight, but that's a little primer for you as we get into that discussion, okay?
Yeah, so the next 3 slides, we are going to talk a little bit about revolving funds. Just to remind everybody again that revolving funds are legally restricted. For example, athletic fees can only be used to offset athletics expenses. And furthermore, any unspent budget operating funds at the end of the year, they do not stay with the schools. We do not transfer them to the revolving funds. They revert back to the town and they become free cash. And by law, we cannot use our revolving accounts to contribute to free cash or to offset any unrelated costs. We also contribute to free cash with our expired encumbrances. So by DESI guidelines, if we have encumbrances from a prior year, we need to spend them by December 31st. Come that deadline and we still have a few thousands left that we did not spend, that money goes back to the town and becomes part of free cash. So this talks about, shows you a little bit of our reliance on revolving funds over the years. You can see over the last 4 years that our reliance has increased. We have been using more revolving funds, and you can see the trend. FY27, for example, we are looking at a projected balance of $6.1 million. It has been continuously decreasing over the years, and we cannot sustain that. Continually drawing from accounts such as athletics, transportation, and ECD situation, it's going to deplete those accounts in the next 2-3 years.
I think this is part of the larger conversation when I reference the structural deficits. When you use money to collect for fee-based programming and whatnot, you offset the cost to run the entire program, but the other part of that money needed to fund it fully comes from the operating budget. So when you have money that you've collected for athletics, if it doesn't support the entire program, which it doesn't, that's from operating is what you use to supplement the rest. So we think structurally, this is a path to we are trying not to rely on revolving funds to support the budget in the ways that we needed to prop it up. And I think ultimately that's what is one example of where structural deficits in your operating budget can be impacting your ability to offer the programming you offer.
So this year, you have listed all of our revolving accounts and dating back to FY24, how much we used each year. You can see ECD situation receipts. In FY24, we used $950,000. We came down in FY25 because we noticed that it was not sustainable. We do not raise $950,000 in tuition a year. FY26, due to the override and the small increase we had, we needed to rely more. FY27, we cannot. We did not generate a lot of revenue this year. So our proposal is to go down to $600,000. So the bottom line is we are proposing to decrease our reliance on revolving funds by nearly 20%. The only increase that you see is the last line, FHS parking fees. We are increasing that by $5,000 because we are generating a little more revenue there. And parking fees essentially cover parking permits, parking lot signs, any maintenance if a camera breaks down and we have the funding available there. we will use the funding there to replace that camera. It also covers part of our campus liaison salaries, which they assist with the parking lot, they assist with transportation.
Issuing the parking passes,
Yep.
tracking it,
All the
that.
supplies
Yep.
that are related to that, like printer supplies that are used to print those parking permits. This is slide 25. Okay, so this slide shows the grants we currently receive and the FY27 proposed budget. So we are keeping FY27 the same as FY26, just because we won't know our true allocations until the summer of FY27. The only exception there is the last grant, the Innovation Career Pathways grant, which is currently in its last year. Correct, Dr. Rogers? Yeah?
So if you look at the right, that box on the right, I think that's a great summary of just the overview. When we think about the stability the last 4 years, it has been stable, but there's been no adjustment for inflation. Also, I think exposure to federal and state budget uncertainties with grants is something we heard about over the summer. I received inquiries from folks on this committee, and I also from the community around what would happen if some of the federal or state grants went away. And that's something that we continue to monitor. And as we said, competitive grants like the Innovative Career Pathways, eventually a lot of those do have a timeline where they're startup grants. It's seed money to get a program off the ground and build the infrastructure and get that employee or get the programming going. And that's why, if you remember, it was 15 grand the first year because we had to put a proposal for a plan. And then once the plan's approved, DESI's saying, hey, we're gonna hold back on, like, we're not just gonna throw you, $90,000. 15 grand up front year one, show us something. And then we'll decide of all the people who got the 15, who's gonna move forward to get to 75. And that's how we were selected as one of, I think, 33 at the time. I don't remember. I might be mixing that. What?
I don't recall.
Okay. But ultimately, that idea is, okay, you've put together a solution. So those things come up. We also don't chase grants that we're not prepared to fully do. I think that's a very dangerous thing to do when you start, when the tail wags the dog in a sense, where there's money out there, but you're required to do all these things with it and use time a certain way. And that's when sometimes employees get frustrated if you're doing grants for the sake of getting the grant, but it's not aligned to your mission and the work you're doing. So we try to look at these and take advantage of every opportunity we get, but we also have to be thoughtful about what's the context in which, where are we at as a district. Okay. Anything else, Ms. Molly?
No?
Okay.
So now this slide talks a little bit about special education circuit breaker reimbursement program, which is a program that helps us partially offset the high cost special ed tuition and other services, related services. While our reimbursement has increased, as you can see the blue line on the right side, you might notice the gap increasing as well. So did our costs. We are getting 4.7 million in reimbursement, but our costs are expecting to go up to $9.7 million. This gap keeps increasing year after year. And as Mrs. Morano mentioned, the state currently reimburses 75% of costs above a threshold, which for FY26, as she mentioned, it's $53,431. I'm not gonna give you an example as she already did, thank you.
You're welcome.
But at the bottom line is, when you hear 75%, it's not really 75%. When you are looking at $73,000 and after the threshold, the reimbursement rate really is 20%. You are getting $15,000 back out of $73,000 expense. So really, it's
Like a
really not,
deductible.
yeah, it's really not 75,000. It really is. You gotta pay the $53K upfront and then receive reimbursement for the difference.
I have another analogy. The right-hand side, I think about when you go to BJ's and you spent like $300 and you come home and you're like, but honey, I saved like $25. It's like, yeah, because you spent so much, you saved so much. So I think like that idea is kind of like the analogy that just popped in my head on that one. All right.
So now this slide shows you the total per pupil expenditure comparison to state average. You can see on the left that Franklin spends $3,745,000 less per student than the state average, and putting us in the bottom 23rd percentile. This means that 77% of the Massachusetts districts spend more per pupil than Franklin. You can also notice on the bottom historic information. I put together 10 years worth of information. And you can see from 2015 up to 2018, we do increase, and we continue to increase our per pupil expenditure. FY24, though, we decreased compared to FY23 and 22. We are back to 2018.
Another term we use a lot, hold harmless.
Yes. So this slide explains hold harmless, which is it's an aid that helps districts maintain state funding, even when enrollment declines. It ensures state funding remains stable to allow the district to plan effectively, maintain programs, and support educational quality. For FY26, Franklin received $150 per pupil increase. However, as you all know, the state is currently reviewing the formula, and we are planning based on a conservative $30 per pupil increase for future years, as high increases cannot be guaranteed. Because Franklin is a minimal aid district, we rely heavily on this provision, the hold harmless provision.
Just would point out too, thank you to the school committee, the town council, and Ms. Malati for the work that went into writing the letters to the state that are reviewing the Chapter 70 formula, and just the impact and stability. So I think for the community to know there's a joint concerted effort, a shared interest in not seeing that hold harmless money leave Franklin. And it's just a shout out to all involved. And then Ms. Malati read a statement at their listening session at a hearing, just to also get it on. So we've written our own letter too, I should say. Actually, we wrote our own.
Yeah.
So between all of the letters and communications, the testifying during their open sessions to try to help Franklin and preserve that, we're done, and we've tried to take advantage of each opportunity that we've had to help us, and we appreciate the work that you all did with your joint letter and the town council's letter that went out as well.
So as I mentioned in the previous slide, Franklin is a minimum aid district. We received the minimum aid increase per pupil, which results in basically flat Chapter 78. Despite the rising costs, it does not keep pace with inflation or the rising costs. And this slide breaks down how the state foundation budget and required local contributions determine our final aid amount. The FY26 required net school spending, NSS, as determined by the state is $82.9 million. This is funded by the required local contribution, 52.4, and the total Chapter 78, 30.4. So when you add them up, you get 82.9 million. I just want to point out that out of that Chapter 78, 30.4 million, almost $14.9 million. It's excess aid base. It's excess base aid held harmless. So when you are talking about removing or going away with the hold harmless provision, that's how much we are, in the hook for, exactly.
Okay, so we will open this up to questions just momentarily. There's just two final slides. First is just the path to approval. What are the next steps after tonight? Ultimately, we've shared our recommended budget information with you. You can expect a full budget book with the details by Friday, February 6th. That's when we typically will get the budget book out. That's in preparation for the February 10th meeting, which would be your open hearing. That's when school committee gets the line by line, the budget book, and then we go through each of the budget, and then you hold and you ask questions, and we go through that process. You then need time between that open hearing and your vote. It's a minimum of 10 days. The next school committee meeting is the 24th, because we have a school vacation week in there in February. So, just to we're here tonight on January 27th. We will get those budget books out by February 6th, which is the Friday. I remember last year driving around and delivering them to different people. Then that Tuesday, February 10th, it will be the open hearing for the school committee. Then you have time between that hearing and the 24th, and then that night of the 24th is when you vote to approve a budget. And then the budget is done, we move forward, the school committee, you've fulfilled your obligation to approve a budget, whatever that budget is, we recommended, but ultimately that night, we would be walking away with, here's the school department's budget as it fits into the large context. And then the next series of meetings are in April, the finance committee holds their hearings with each department around their budget that you've approved. And then we move to May, where the town council holds their budget hearings for each department. Ultimately, the decisions made in May result in May and June for final approvals to take place and whatnot. And then July 1 starts the fiscal year all over again. And that's where we would enter July 1 with the final approved budget as we move forward. So that's just a buffer on the timeline. And then we're just ending with a couple of slides that just, this slide in particular, and we'll open up the questions. It's just around how we started the conversation. We're ending with, we really tried to put together a budget that was disciplined, that was transparent, that looked strategically at the cost avoidances that we had because of the reorganizational decisions we made. We tried to create more resilience and less reliance on one-time revolving funds, and ultimately a commitment to try to protect the core programs that we have, the class sizes we have, and whatnot within the district, and we were able to do that with the 2.5% increase. I will say this was really a lot of effort to get to the place where we did, to strategically be there. I know other departments are in the same boat at 2.5%, and ultimately I want to make it clear to this committee and the community, and I said this to in a few meetings that we had over the past few weeks with different bodies, just around, this was us really trying to be as thoughtful and fiscally responsible given the context Franklin has been in order to put a budget forward. And ultimately, we feel confident in what we've put together for you, and we're happy to answer any questions. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the committee? Reese?
Before I start, Chair, I've got a handful of questions. Should I ask a few and then pass the mic and come back around, or should
Yeah, let's go with, 2 each and go all the way through, and then we can cycle back. All set.
Okay, sounds good. So to start with, I want to make sure that I understand part of the presentation correctly. We've got the proposed budget of $81.2 million, and then later on, and actually I can give you, I think the slide that I'm referring to is going to be 29. I'm sorry, I know you just went all the way back to the beginning. That is where the 81.2 is. But here we go. So we're looking at the required local contribution of $52.5 million here, plus the Chapter 78. That brings us to $82.9 million. So what I'm seeing here is that the only way that we fail to meet your proposed budget is if the town fails to provide the required local contribution. Is that accurate?
Yes, that is accurate. The way that the district would only be unable to meet the required net school spending it's if the town fails to meet its required local contribution under Chapter 70. However, the number that you saw, the 81.2 million, it's only operating budget for the schools. It does not take into account revolving funds and grants that all count towards NSS, net school spending, and also does not take into account town-related expenses. Town expenses related to the school, such as facilities and public works. Those all come towards NSS. In summary, after you add them all, we we usually meet the required net school spending.
Okay, very good, thank you. What happens if we fail to meet the required local contribution?
So if we fail to meet the requirement net school spending, you are looking at possibly loss of state aid. You can also have an issue with approving the town's tax rate. You can also run into issues with your attorney general. Those are the main three.
Very good, thank you.
Yeah.
I'll pass it here.
I have a list, so I'm just trying to cherry pick right now. What defines minimum aid district?
That's a great question.
And why is Franklin? Sorry, I didn't mean to stop you.
Yeah, I will have to get back to you on that. No, I'll have to get back to you on
Okay.
that. I don't even have my book.
But generally speaking, it's a matter of the income and property values for the town. It's a measure of
The
how
wealth.
much you can contribute
Yes.
as
So it's
a
determined
local.
by the state.
It is.
Yes.
It's a state-determined measure,
Yeah.
and it's based on your aggregate wealth, your value,
Okay.
property value, your aggregate wealth.
I'm gonna jump around a little bit, which is probably gonna drive everyone nuts, but, for the circuit breaker, what determines the $35,000 threshold, and how does that change annually?
Yeah, it's the state that tells us what the threshold is that year.
You mean the $53,000?
Yeah, it's the state.
That's determined by the state.
By
So
the
this
state.
is FY '26, FY '27 will be a different rate.
Is it usually similar?
It's usually
Yeah.
similar,
Not a lot of
yeah.
fluctuation, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
We did also ask, and it'll come up again in the legislative forum that we have planned for all the superintendents in the state, in our area, our region. We're inviting our state reps to the legislative forum. Typically, the superintendent and the chair and the school committee will attend as well. We are asking about the reimbursement increasing from 75% to 90%. I think that's one of the assets already been put out on the table, that's public. But ultimately, looking at that formula and seeing where can we get some additional increased revenue or funding for these particular examples. So that's also on the docket. It's just there's no guarantees that we that move forward, but those are requests that we have.
It's
And your
based
group
on
as
what
well.
the governor determines as part of the
Okay,
budget.
yeah, I was curious to see if that varied by district or if it was
No,
tiered.
no, it's a flat rate
It
for
is
all
a set
districts
rate,
within the
yeah.
Commonwealth, and it's determined how she budgets in her budget, which you hear about soon, I guess.
That was too
Al?
Yeah, thank you. So once again, this is probably the best budget, superintendent budget presentation I've seen so far. I commend you all, this leadership, the group effort, just to get this in. I think it really tells a compelling story that I think people are able to digest easily, because this is a very complicated process. In my time being here, it's gotten a lot more user-friendly.
Thank you.
So thank you. So that's at least the start of that. Want to jump to slide 13 because one of the things that we pride ourselves is really being lean with the staff that we have and really getting the most out of the people that we have and then really providing great education for our students. And while it's a great thing, I also want to folks to think through the downside of this, right? We're below in all areas except for special education and special ed paraprofessionals. We are lower than the ratios for the state, and what this tells me is that we have people doing more work to support our students than other areas. So we have you all here that have a smaller staff that is wearing multiple hats and juggling them, doing all these different things, and making magic happen, which is great. But that's not really fair to all of you. That's not fair for our teachers. It's not fair for our students because less teachers means larger classroom sizes, you know, less teachers means, less avenues for that one-on-one support that, I think, all of us parents, we want our kids to have that support. So I think this really just tells us that, like, from a budget perspective and like a priority perspective, do we want our children to have more opportunities, or do we want them to have a teacher that's juggling in with multiple students? So it's just something to think about when we talk about the budget and where our money's going. But it's amazing just the work that we get out based off of the ratios that we do. So commend you, your staff, the educators, the custodians, the whole nine, to make magic with what they're giving. The other thing, another question or a comment, regarding the budget book, can we opt to get them electronically? So just to save from printing, they are very heavy, saving from delivering, so I will take electronic and.
What we'll do is we typically ask each of you how you would like it. Well, everyone gets the electronic, and really, it's really about if you want it printed, you just tell us, and then we would provide it printed.
Yeah.
That's what we'll do.
Yeah. Cool. So I will save my other stuff and pass it on.
So we'll default, we agree to default to electronic unless you want, you can tell me at the end of the night, or now, or whatever.
I like that.
Yeah, I think that's the best approach, but fiscally and from an environmental standpoint, we'll approach it as we all get it
Saving some
electronically,
trees.
unless specifically
Yep.
notified by an individual.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, I guess, I just had so one thing, I guess it's more of just something to point out, so to the 2.5%, that sort of first slide, we said the 2.5% in the healthcare. And thanks for kind of taking the healthcare at least out of that line item, because I think the big stressor was, as we were educating the community about why we needed the override last year, the healthcare thing became a point of contention, because everybody, the rhetoric was sort of like, the schools can't live within their means, they can't live within their means. And it was like, well, we're carrying this on our operation budget and others aren't, so we're not doing so badly, you know? So it's helpful from like a PR perspective.
Yeah.
I think it's important to point out that the Chapter 70 doesn't go up 2.5% every year. So although it's not a huge portion of our budget, it's still, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars difference, as opposed to like if the state aid portion of our operational budget versus our local portion, if our local portion goes up 2.5%, but our state portion goes up 1%, then that leaves us like, if it's 30 million, I think it's like $500,000 difference, as you know, as opposed to 1%. So, just something maybe worth mentioning, but when we present to town council, just because you know it's not like we're getting total increase. I continue to hear from counselors still, no matter how much we bring this point up, that we cannot use revolving funds for things outside. So thank you for making that such an apparent point. So what I understand is we can use operational funds to fund revolving activities, but we cannot use revolving activities to fund operational costs. So how much do we have it line itemed out a bit, like with those revolving funds? Like, do we have in our budget book like a line item about how much of the operation budget being hit by revolving? I don't remember.
Just to be clear that I understand your question,
Yeah.
Just taking athletics, do you mean how much we spend in athletics and how much we use revolving funds to offset those costs?
Right, I'm wondering
Okay.
how much.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we
should
do
be into
have that.
operation
Yeah.
for, just because I think like, for the larger community, as we sort of, because I have this override on my mind, the committee, the grassroots people have reached out to say, what are you thinking? And I'm like, well, we haven't been told we're short yet. Like, so I don't have a big opinion right now. I know as the structural thing in our town is, I just don't know where the schools are gonna land in that, so I don't know if my purview is asking for an override yet, so. But I think that's just as I look to even other countries in the world, really,
I want to say to the town, as different departments get in front of the town council, to say, there comes a point where if we do not collect enough, and we're already getting emails up the wazoo about our athletic fees and things like that, so I know what it would look like if we increased them even more. It'd be absurd. But if we continue to have to dip into our operational costs for full-time academic teachers to offset athletics, there's gonna be a point where we're not gonna do that anymore. And so we're either gonna have even more exorbitant fees, or we're literally gonna like shut them down. Like, so it's, I mean, I'm just saying, like, at some point, as it gets close,
We'll provide
it's
in
good
the
to
budget
know,
book.
it's good to know how much it's, you know,
Yeah.
things that are outside academics are costing, you know?
So, for example, athletics is its own page in the budget book, and it will
Right.
be listed out, the costs
Yeah.
associated, and I think to answer your question directly, it will show what it costs to run the athletic department and the costs associated and where the funding can come from. We can make a note to share with you what the projected revenue from collecting for athletic fees would be applied, and then what will be supplemented with our operational budget.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's helpful.
Okay.
So, I can, and the other thing I wanted to kind of point out is, it's amazing that we're keeping it at 2.5%, because we've heard over and over from people like Dr. Dutch, who've worked in other districts, and things that schools don't typically live at 2.5%. They live somewhere between like 3.5, 3.8. So, congrats for doing this, and I will make sure that the town knows it. Thanks. Hopefully we don't need cuts by doing this. This is,
Thank you.
that's all I have. I could just keep.
Stephen?
Mine is on the slide 21 on the healthcare. I'm pretty sure the healthcare contracts are done by the town, right?
Yes.
It's something not, because a lot of
Yeah.
people doesn't know that, no, they think that the school committee takes care of it. That's
Yeah,
what-
we have no control over, and we do
Yeah,
not
no
negotiate.
control over
Yeah.
that, and no negotiations, everything is taken care of.
There is a joint group that meets to look at healthcare, and that's facilitated. Typically, it's representatives from each of the unions. I know that, Ms. Bellotti, do you go to that meeting?
I do go to
Yeah,
them.
and our HR director as well. I
Yeah.
know Mr. Helen has facilitated that group, the town administrator has led that group, and they have worked to negotiate the healthcare costs, and his team of HR and business as well, so.
It makes sense to move that to town council in that case, right? So my only question you touched upon, like, it should not drive the staffing or any of our needs. Like, for example, right, town should not say, hey, you have this much budget for health, and you should not go beyond. It should not impact our staffing, or, that's something we have to be very careful. Right now, we see is like, we have the leverage of, identifying the staffing and then getting the funding for the health, right? But if it goes there, it should not drive us. That's one thing we have to be careful and make a note on that. The second one is on the slide 10. If you can go to the slide 10, please. Yeah. So we're looking at the staffing has come down from 70% to 68%, which is approximately 1.6 million, right? Does it refer to the decrease in the staff, or every
Yes.
year?
That decrease is a result of looking at last year's reductions as a result of consolidation through reorganization has contributed to that percentage decrease as part of it. Now that's salaries, that's a line of salaries. So FTEs, it's just, because at the same time, the people who are still with us working also see an increase in their salary at the same time. So that bucket is what we pay for all employees that work with us within there.
Yeah, and-
But yeah, just to be clear to the community.
Yeah. So the salaries, so
It's
the
still
point
taken.
here is like, do we anticipate any other further staffing reduction this year? Because I see the number going down by 2%. I'm just wanted to clarify
Yeah.
that.
The only, let me jump to the slide that kind of illustrates this. The annual staffing model. This is what I was referring to. I appreciate the question because in context, what we do is we are in the process, we review the staffing as I mentioned. I put up the example of the staffing. Those are real numbers that we are budgeting for next year in order to maintain. And you'll notice that there wasn't a decrease in classroom teachers on that slide. What we do is we do look at our enrollment for every single category of role that supports the district, and we make enrollment-based reductions. We have just not been in that situation the last 3 years because of 2 failed overrides and a reorganization. Very unique things in a career, you know. I feel like I've done 3 in a row. Really unique things that I sit at a dinner with like 8 superintendents and they're all asking me questions. I'm like, I'm the least senior person here. Why am I telling you about, you know, anyway. So it's interesting that I just think context-wise for our community, if you've been around, and you, I'm not saying you haven't, but prior years, we would have seen over time, and you heard enrollment-based reductions. So as the town and a number of students decreased over the time, the number of staffing we had to educate students decreased at that same that rate. And I think you could look at previous presentations prior to 2020, 2018, 2016, you'll see, hey, we had X amount of people serving in this role. I'm trying to be as general as possible because we're in January. But like, hey, X amount of people, educated students in this particular role. There's now 25 less students. So now we don't need 6 of them, we need 5 of them. So that just happens, and every district goes through that. So to answer your question, we are not looking to increase our FTE, and we're not looking to right here, we look at retirements, resignations, and trying to reallocate, just like we showed you last year. We're looking to maximize the people and leverage the FTEs we have. We just don't have that information for you tonight. And ultimately what we would do is our process is, we always meet with the union to kind of go through any type of reduction like that. Then we notify individuals before we have any type of public conversation. But ultimately the goal here was not to, build a budget based on level services we provide today, and not look to make cuts like in a failed override situation, and also not look to add a bunch of positions that we didn't previously have in the budget, FTEs, if you will. So that's how we came up with the budget that we did. And we're also cognizant of the context we're living in. We're looking at a budget where we have a structural deficit we have not solved, but ultimately putting forth a budget where we can provide and protect the core programs and services we have as a district was how we came up with this budget. And this will become clearer. We're kind of like zooming in on the earth, and we're about to get closer and get into the right hemisphere, and then get into the right country, and then get in deeper. And you'll see that as you receive the budget book, the line by line at the hearing, and then get through that budget process, this will become clearer, and it gives us a chance to make sure we're communicating in the appropriate ways that we have to as well.
One last thing on the staffing, and then I'll pass the mic. Is there a way we can see the open positions from Franklin staffing perspective, school staffing perspective? Is there a way we can look at the open positions or the position that needs to be filled with respect to staffing?
Yeah, like what vacancies we have?
Yes.
Yeah, open position.
Yeah, we can share that.
Oh.
Do you mean like what we have on, like right now, what's available, what's open?
Yeah, what's open? Just wanted to see, right?
We
if
could
there's
go to
anything-
School Spring and share that, we can do that.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, first, very much for all the work that went into this. This was fantastic. We'll pick up an easy one for you. So a couple of years ago, you did the Tale of 4 budgets. And then we had a complete reorganization with a budget accelerated by about 4 months. Now we have a zero-based budget, kind of living within this and completely sustainable with a 2.5% increase. Are you ever going to take the easy route and just copy and paste one budget to the next one?
I would love to, it's not possible. So that was a nice softball, appreciate it. No, it's not. We have to do this every year, and the context changes. This gets more and more difficult every future year we do. We talked about dependence. So yes, I appreciate the question. This will get harder. We're just at a point where we've landed a plane that we've implemented a lot of tremendous change, and a lot of people working in the district have experienced tremendous change. And what our goal is to try to put forth a budget that it wouldn't make sense to put together an undisciplined budget that ultimately isn't realistic based on the fiscal context. So without changing the mechanisms, the structure of our budget, and I talk about structural deficit, it really felt like we were trying to put together a program that looked at, okay, how many people do we have in front of kids in FY26? How can we make sure that the core services are preserved? And then what do we need within the district to continue to focus? And we'll get clearer on the specifics of that in future budgets, presentations.
But really, it's just, and there's so much work that kind of goes into this, and for the folks at home, when we kind of hear about the zero-based budget approach, it really is, thank you, we're starting just from ground level, effectively kind of burning everything down from last year and starting fresh and analyzing every single tax dollar and how it can best be allocated and taking nothing for granted. It is an incredibly massive lift. I remember, again, my professor from grad school, there would always kind of be two things he would talk about. One, never send a Christmas card to somebody who's not going to send you one. And also never do zero-based budgeting for your own budgeting just because of how much work is involved. And he would always try to steer you to an easier path. And it's not that
I didn't take that class.
No, you shouldn't. But I just appreciate all the work that the entire office and the whole staff goes into this, and I hope that everybody at home sees that as well. This is not just a kind of copy and paste from last year to the next. There's so much work that goes into these slides and into the budget book itself. It's fantastic, so thank you guys. And then shifting over to the page, slide 16, this one for Paula.
Can I make a comment before?
Please.
Just to hit on that, the budget, just so you know, Ms. Malati puts together workbooks, just to kind of talk, we talked about this process before, very brief, give me 20 seconds. She puts together workbooks, assigns them to each individual school, and then the principals have to go through with a fine-tooth comb. We do a line by line internally, like you do a line by line, we do one for expenses and salaries with every book. We're all in the room with the principal. They are defending their budget. You'll notice with expense lines, many of the schools were able to decrease expenses just because we're living it. They're optimizing the resources they have. We've kind of landed from a lot of moves. We shifted supplies and materials to different schools to make sure they followed children and the number of kids we had. So I just think like the level of detail, that's the core of the zero-based, is like having the cost center. The departments have to sit with the meeting with the two of us that you scheduled, and people met and went through every single line to make sure, and this is after we just reorganized all the, I don't say we, I didn't do it, she did it. But ultimately, the coding and the state reporting coding to make sure it was consistent across schools, so we can start to really do in future years as we look to apples comparisons, we were able to look at that. And I'm excited about the work around just it's like a fiscal fitness, I might coin that. Ultimately that has gone into it, so just a credit to the team, and I think we just to kind of give some context to what the comment made.
It's fantastic. There's actually one quick, and on that too, you talk about, I love, like in the last budget book, there'd be like a little asterisk to say like why this line item went up and this one went down, and it was just because things kind of got reallocated.
Well,
We can continue that?
Definitely, it's already there.
All right. Not surprised. Thank you. On this one over here, you talk about there's a 3.6% out of district increase. I think the special, you just kind of like, because this is the same one that we saw a couple of years ago, it was at 14%, it was like $750,000 that came about. Can you just kind of elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure, so every year, the Office of
Operational Services Support.
I had it up here, but anyway, OSD, will put out what their cost of living increase will be for the year. So that would be that's what the 3.4% is for across the board for out-of-district schools. However, there are some out-of-district schools who actually go to get a more insignificant increase, like 15%, 30% and whatnot. And there's this whole process they have to go through to see if they can be approved to increase their tuition by even more than that cost of living increase. There's about, I want to say, 8 schools right now that are in the process of doing that. So that will be an added increase for out-of-district costs.
And when the state comes in and kind of provides those numbers, I mean, that's not us, like not negotiating a better deal.
We cannot negotiate a better. They tell us what those rates are going to be, what that percentage increase is going to be. And even when they go to out-of-district schools petition to have a more significant tuition increase, we can give our 2 cents. We can attend this meeting and say why that wouldn't be feasible for us our districts, but more likely than not, it will be. So.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
And then I just had a couple things that will continue down with this adventure. Hopefully, no one's questions have gotten answered, or no one's extra questions have gotten answered. We have just as long ahead of us. So on slide 23, I believe, looking at the reliance on the revolving funds. There we go. I just wanted to kind of clarify for folks, because I think the statement that we made here, saying that basically we've overdrawn from these accounts. If you just stare at the trend lines, you'd say, oh, no, everything's just kind of going down. I think one thing to really note here is, Ms. Malati is doing a great job of showing how impactful her new approach is going to be with the reliance on revolving funds decreasing this year. So if you look at the first 3 data points here, kind of across the board between total fund balance, you see that there is this kind of general trend down. That's kind of the easy one to understand, where you have a lower overall revolving fund balance over time. And in the future, I'll be happy to kind of explore this with folks. This changes a lot throughout the year. Basically this is a snapshot. Throughout the year, we're going to draw down from this. The analogy I like using is, it's like the kid who saves up all summer for college, goes to college, and like runs through their money for the first like 4 or 5 months, comes back, has a job for a couple of months, and then tries to finish the year. And by the end of it, they like call home for gas money. The revolving funds in a single snapshot might look like a significant amount, but really we need to have it there where it's able to be drawn from for an extended period of time without necessarily being replenished from fees. But with these are all taken at the same point in time, so it is a good comparator for us. The amount drawn, if you notice, for years 23 to 24, 24 to 25, and then 25 to 26, are all well above, there's basically an upward trend there for those 3. And then as soon as we get to the current year, that's where you basically drop that trend back down. The reason this is trending downward, the reason that it's actually lining up with our total fund balance decrease, is because we're cutting back so much this year. If we maintain the same level of expenditures we had done before, you would see these 2 lines intersecting, and that's never a good thing. It means we're drawing significantly more from our overall fund balance than we're putting in on a year-to-year basis. So anyone who's a little bit confused by that, this is really actually showing how we've already responded to it and the impact of that response. If we didn't have that final data point in, we'd have essentially intersecting lines, and we'd be in a lot of trouble. So just want to make sure to clarify that for folks. The other slide that I'd love to just kind of go over quickly and highlight for all those watching, slides, I believe it's 19 and 20, either one of them really kind of, this actually does an even better job of looking at it. Even at a quick glance here, there's a lot of red on this slide, and this is for salary lines. The idea here is that, these are things, as has been mentioned many times over, that are contractually obligated. And you see the direction that things are moving, right? They're not situations where we have lots of flexibility to kind of move things around. And actually, if we go to the next slide real quick, you see where we do have some of these opportunities to kind of flex, right? These are these are expenses for the different school lines, and you see that we have some that are red. Obviously we're continuing to see increased expenses there, but we do have some where we're making some pretty significant cuts. So like about halfway down, you see superintendent's office is actually cut by 71%. It's a huge cut. It's obviously not something we can do year after year, but when you look at the overall budget impact, it's 0.05%. It's not going to move the needle. And these are things where we have been trying to do this year after year, where every little place that we can squeeze, we do, because our set expenses and our set increases are going to continue going up no matter what. So we've continued to try and be very fiscally responsible here. We've tightened things a lot, and I think we'll see that as we're going through the line items during the public hearing. But just one, I want to make sure that people are understanding, if we're cutting 70% from that line item this year, from the superintendent's office or the business office as well, I believe Ms. Malati, that's your office. Next year, so if we cut 70% next year, we're cutting from a much smaller base anyway. We can't just cut our way into massive amounts of savings. And a big part of that is actually highlighted. It's a trend throughout the whole thing that I've seen on like 3 or 4 slides. But if you look at really what it all comes down to, when you look at our increase and the ask that we have, if we kept everything the exact same, Nothing changes whatsoever, FTE wise, any other expenses, any costs. Special ed costs are up 1.1 million, salaries are up 1.1 million, and then these general expenses, as we're kind of highlighting here, even though we've done a great job of going in and really cutting back at as many places as possible, are still going up $650,000. So there is a lot of things that don't move with any kind of control that we have that do go up every year. And really what we're continuing to see year after year, and this has been true as long as I've been here, is that everything else, all the parts that people don't see, are shrinking every single year. We're doing a lot more with less. You know, we looked at that when we were doing the state comparisons. We're always doing more and more and more with less. I've heard, I've seen folks comment that we have way too many administrators. I think that, that's just kind of the simple solution. And I think if we go to that slide, thank you, Lucas, you notice that we are significantly below the state average when it comes to leadership in general. Our administrative staff are well below, what we have or what we look at against the state. District leaders, in the institutional leadership area, are significantly below the state. Like, we are really the epitome of doing more with less. So I think it's really important that as folks try to point at very simple solutions as we're going through this process, as we're discussing things with town council and looking at, hey, we can solve this. We can always find something where to cut. We don't think that there's really, people aren't going through with a fine-tooth comb, that we really check into what that means and all the places that we do cut year after year after year, and ultimately how little that matters. Because the primary budget drivers, which is the entire theme throughout this discussion, are things beyond our control that don't change in our favor no matter what we do. So, just want to make sure everyone's kind of on that same page as we go through this process. I do really appreciate that we are doing this so early. I know that there's always a lot of questions around budget. We are a significant portion of the town's budget. So to be able to really engage the community and have those conversations now, and also to be able to answer them from folks later, is great. I do look forward to continuing, this process and really engaging more with everyone across the community. But it really is, there's not going to be some kind of magic solution for us at any point in time. It's not in the cards. We actually pulled that off a couple years back, found $3.1 million during the redistricting, and that was the closest thing you ever get to just finding a ton of money lying around. And unless we want to go through that adventure on an annual basis, I think we're going to run out of schools at some point. It's not really sustainable.
It's not realistic.
So I'll hop off my pedestal for a minute and kick it back down to these.
Very good, thank you. I want to add something to the Chair Callahan's question earlier, to which Ms. Morano answered about how special education tuition rates are set by the Operational Services Division. I just wanted to add to that answer that the OSD regulation means that those tuition rates are not subject to for-profit whims and motives. Thank you, Ms. Malati, for that information. On that note, do you know of any current state-level initiatives that might help confront rising health insurance costs?
Health insurance. Let's see my notes. Can you repeat your question?
Yeah, do you know of any state-level initiatives that might help our town, other towns confront rising health insurance costs?
Yes. Massachusetts has several active state-level initiatives to address rising health insurance costs. These efforts combine regulatory oversight, cost growth, benchmarks, expanded coverage programs, and enforcement of rebate requirements to help limit premium increases. One example is the Healthcare Affordability Group, which was established by the governor this month, January, to develop further strategies throughout this year just to help lower healthcare costs.
Very good. So just establish this so maybe sometime before we see what comes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. The other thing I wanted to ask about, one of the other things I wanted to ask about, what factors, sorry, this is going to be slide, I think it's 27. there it is, in the lower left corner, the comparison of Franklin's funding versus other towns. And on the right side there, we start to see a little curve upward where the state average has accelerated.
The gap is increasing.
Exactly. What's enabled other towns to increase their funding at a faster rate than Franklin has?
Well, in many communities, you are looking at stronger revenues, overrides that passed, or even enrollment declines that drive higher per pupil spending. Franklin's, we are not in that situation. We have tighter revenue growth. We had failed overrides. We had cuts to our staff. All that decreases our ability to keep up with the total per pupil spending.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
That's a great one to leave off on because I think that's a pretty big change from 32% to 23%. I think we were recognizing that a lot of districts were feeling a lot of the same pains that we were, and now we're down to 23%. I do also want to mention, though, even though we were in the bottom 23%, we had a fabulous presentation last week which outlined our MCAS scores and our iReady scores and how they compare to the state, and we were on average better than, in every category, better than the other districts, better than the state levels. So that is something incredible to note, that we are still performing well above state average, even though we are in the bottom 23rd of the state. Few other questions. What is an example of an expired encumbrance?
So let's say we have a contract in June for a teacher reimbursement. They have a deadline. They need to submit for reimbursement for any courses they take. And it is a contractual obligation. So we do encumber those funds to make sure that we have those funds available to reimburse the teacher. If come December 31st and said teacher did not submit the paperwork to get reimbursed, those encumbrances expire and revert back to the town. So our basically purchases that we didn't receive invoices by the time that we close out the year. We usually close out the year on July 15th. So if we did not receive invoices from vendors, we will carry that amount for that invoice, that service that was provided in the prior year up until December 31st.
Do we have any idea of how much money gets carried over to the general fund at the end of the year?
From the schools, very little, because we do we do a great job, like really projecting, budgeting, like down to the dollar. So you are looking at $5,000–6,000. You're not looking at a lot.
Can I follow up on that?
Yes.
Just thinking about being a human business of educating, where we can predict and determine the staffing, what we need and what we need to afford for the entire year, much easier than trying to predict, like I think it came up a few meetings ago around like weather elements. You can't predict the storm. You can read the farmer's almanac, but you need to have a contingency. We experienced this like recently, like today, around like trying to predict to make sure that you have funding available, for instance, to make sure that your roads are passable in your town. So you have to predict out. With us, it's so fixed on a teacher is hired for the year for the set number of students that you need. So I think there's just differences in how we budget. So when we budget, we don't often end up in situations where we haven't expended the amount of money. And what we've asked for is what we intended to spend. So I think it goes back to the idea of the nature of our work in our specific department being really highly human-based, and then ultimately trying to predict out. I think we have less variability with some of the costs and expenses that we know come July 1 that we will have to pay for the year.
Do we have have any idea what our average out-of-district tuition costs are prior to the circuit breaker?
Show that slide.
That's that column there before. Slide 16.
So I could just speak briefly, just the out-of-district tuition, depends on where the student's being educated.
Right.
So a student who has, I'll just say like a visually impaired student who needs a specialized program for students who have visual impairments, it would be a different tuition cost than maybe a student who's attending a collaborative for whatever their needs are. So I think it depends on, to average, we could do an average. I don't know that it would be accurate based on the
Right.
number of students, but
And like I said,
I get the question though.
right, and like I said, with every, like some related services, one-to-ones, it's hard to pick an average, but I would say ballpark, 150.
Okay, no, I think that's helpful. I mean, I just did a quick Google myself, and it like the collaborative ones were around $32,000, and some of the private ones were upwards
Yeah,
of
those would be most
$100,000.
expensive
So I
ones.
think I just
Yeah,
kind of just
residential
wanted
is-
to note there's a huge range there.
Oh, yes.
And so that 75% really doesn't look like a whole chunk of change at the end of the day. I also, I'll just end on this, I want to point out the link that is on a couple of slides, which I'm looking at page 28, where it's the spending comparisons for school finance. If anybody likes and appreciates data the way I do, it is it's a great breakdown by all of the districts in Massachusetts, with teacher salary, average teacher salaries, performance statistics, low income numbers, proportions, and enrollment numbers. So if you want to comparatively look across districts and see where we're at, I think it's just a great reference point.
Thank you for noting that. It's 2024 because that's the latest that's available.
Yeah.
That's not because we chose it to support a persuasive essay. Thinking of my son, gonna pick a more, so anyway, I just think about 2024 is the latest info they have. Next year, 2025 will be available.
Yeah, no further questions, thanks, though.
Wow.
Yeah, they are. I told you it was a good presentation.
Thank
Ruth Ann?
No questions, but I'm thinking about that minimum aid question you had, because the reason we're in minimum aid is because we're so wealthy. It's because of our land value and median income. So because of our declining enrollment that happened, that like everyone used to, cry about, speak about, that's why we were granted home harmless. So that's kind of the story there, so. I don't have any other questions, everyone's covering it, okay.
Steve?
Yeah, just coming back to the specialist cost, right? I think
16.
slide number 16. I think previously when you presented this cost, I had a question of like what is the number of students that goes out of district. It would be great if you can put that number just for
That, so the number of students out of district are on the grid above, for 25-26 is 77 students are going out of district right now.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you. And how does the savings being calculated on the right?
Yes, so I calculated the savings by just, this time the savings is based on the circuit breaker reimbursement rather than without reimbursement, so. So that's why the savings looks a little bit lower than it did the last time I presented this slide, so.
Because last time we saw a huge number.
You did, right, but this time I did it based on the circuit breaker reimbursement.
Okay. So, just
Those are short. We're good.
yeah. So coming back to this reorg, right? So I know we did 3.2 savings, and now we are expecting a number of for this year. I think only 2.5, right? So
2.5%.
2.5%. So do we still see an issue with this because we already saved 3.2? We spoke about it earlier as well, right? So do we anticipate any kind of a pushback on this 2.5?
I don't know, I won't predict what the response will be from others. I do know we've been in conversations, we meet with the town administrator bi-weekly. I think the 2.5% falls right in line with other departments. So I feel like we're in the company of the entire town and what the increase in the ask is for. So that would be a comment. The other thing is, I would say cost avoidance is a word I would use this year, because it's not, it was a savings last year, but this year it's avoided costs to the budget. So, but to your point, it's 3.1 million last year. So if you think if we did nothing, if we had not reorganized, that number would compound. And I think, and I know I just want to reiterate that to folks who maybe are reading this slide or watching at home. But ultimately, I don't know. Only thing I do know is that being at 2.5% based on an credit, I know like when we talk with the contractual obligations we have with our teachers union, with our employees, all the things that went into kind of where we landed today, were all about a lot of people working together to get to a place where we try to be as fiscally responsible as possible. I would agree, I know Mrs. O'Sullivan brought up the idea of where are we at with our funding, where do we compare to the state, what percentile we're at in the bottom percentile. There's certainly room for growth and work, but I think what I see is, I think we have structural deficit across all departments in town, and I think there's arguments that have been made at previous joint budget listening sessions, at the joint budget subcommittee, during the school committee meetings, at the hearings around the need in town. And I think that's what ultimately led to seeking an override twice. So I think we're in a position where we've put a budget together after landing a plane, after a major reorganization that happens once. You can't go back to the well with another reorg. And I know that was said as partly a joke, but there's no other way we can reshift and shake this out. But we're just landing the plane, and we've put together the services we're offering today, core services. We're looking to offer the same core services tomorrow for our students, and that's how the budget was built. And getting at 2.5% was one of the goals that we had, so we could be unified and look at how do we solve this together and move us forward.
So I just want to take a second and expand on that. That's a really challenging question, and the main reason for that is that we don't have any control over it. That the entire decision rests with 9 people who've been elected to town council. As a reference point for you, last year we put up roughly 3.6%, request for roughly 3.6% in the same type of breakdown as this. Where we again saw a very, very large increase in our health insurance. We highlighted it time and time again during joint budget meetings, during our budget meetings, during our budget subcommittee meetings, that we were actually requesting about 2.5% for our operating budget. And when all was said and done, again, understanding we're asking for 3.6, 14% of that increase is in healthcare. So really we're pretty narrow in what we have, like flexibility-wise. Town council appropriated less than 1% increase. So at that point in time, we don't, there's not an answer that we have, there's not an answer that Lucas can give. He can put forward as good a budget as possible, again, balancing it, looking at it as a consistent approach across the rest of the town. But that final decision comes to town council. So if we end up in a situation like this year, as we said, this is a level budget, this keeps everything the same. If the choice of those 9 is that they want to see reductions in that, the only way to do that is to have direct impacts on the students that we have, direct impacts on what we offer in this district. So that's really kind of where this is an interesting balancing act. We decide where it all goes from here, but what we actually get is entirely beyond anyone's control in this room.
It's not about question or anything, it's about.
But it was a great question, that's
Yeah,
why I just wanted to
educating
expand on
the
it.
families about how we operate, though we are showing that as a savings last year and then avoidance cost this year, but we are still looking for percentage of increase. That's something I wanted to get that clarified. Thank you so much for both of you.
Just for clarity, we received a 1.08% increase last year, just for the record, for clarity. And it was, I had to clarify, I just wanted to make sure it was clear, it was accurate. But ultimately, the other piece to that is it was on the heels of a failed override, which resulted in cuts across the town, as we're all very well aware of, and sat front row to many of those meetings. So, okay, thank you.
One last thing on the slide 23, if you can go back. So I'm just trying to understand. So are we saying that we have the total fund of 6.1, but we are leveraging only 2.7?
Yeah, this is the projected for FY '27. And it is a large amount,
Yeah.
but you need to understand that this includes food services department and lifelong learning. So we are very limited into what we can draw from those specific funds because their staff, their costs are already covered within the revolving funds. So the only cost that we can really draw from those specific funds are health insurance costs for their staff. Those are the largest revolving funds that you see.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm all set.
It just starts, we kind of talked about like override. This is a big pie in the sky, and it's unfair to kind of ask right now, but like what might this budget look like if one of those overrides had passed? Are there things that you would have liked, kind of like that Thrive budget, things that you would have liked to have seen included in there?
Yes, I can give two quick examples. We had put in the budget 2 STEM positions for the elementary level, if you remember. We moved forward with 1 and we've put 2. We had 2 admins for special education because we've consolidated our in-district programming from spread out across 5 elementaries, for example. Now it's in 2 complexes, right? When we think about the middle school having 3 middle schools with the programs at each school under one roof, what we realized is there was a need to make sure that we're supporting the teachers in the classrooms, the teachers in the general ed setting, and having someone who was specialized in special education and leadership. We only were able to afford 1 of those positions. I would have had both. Those are 2 quick examples. Do you want to say it out loud?
I would say that our athletic fees likely would
Oh,
not
yes,
be at
thank
the
you.
rate that they're
Yeah.
at, should we have had asked for.
And I think I received a little resistance, along the way, but we committed to, if the override passed, we would adjust those fees. That was part of what we tried to have as a selling point as part of it. So those are just a few examples. And I think if another opportunity came, we could illustrate some of the things that we have not had or lost and whatnot. But this is an attempt to preserve our core programming and put forth the request that continues to offer the services today, tomorrow, in the same way. That's how this budget was built to do. But I think that's certainly a deeper question, and I would love to prepare and talk to the team and the folks that work directly with kids in our buildings before I was able to come back and report out. But those are specific examples of asks that we had that were cut over the summer because we weren't able to put them. You would approve them for your process, we just didn't have the money. And that's all I want.
No, and I really appreciate that, and I know, and yeah, we're not, at this, not looking for those tailored for budgets or any other. This is already pretty fantastic, kind of put forward to us. But I think it's great just for the community itself, just to kind of understand. We could look at it and say, well, you know what, we went and we voted down that override, and I don't necessarily feel it. And they went and last time they voted down that override, and honestly, it's the major, almost every single key point of what happened, the results of those failed overrides was hitting our schools and our students, including even, I know the police, they had to lose 2 officers who were school resource officers that was impacted directly in the schools. And so it's, this budget, again, and it's fantastic, and I love it, and I can't wait to approve it. But, I know that it's not what we could have had. There could have been a lot more that we could have been providing to our kiddos. And anyone that has, as a parent, a caregiver, whomever, you see how kids grow up in a blink of an eye. And that's why it's just so imperative to quickly fund our public schools to the best of our ability as quickly as possible, because these kiddos just grow up so fast. And to one of the very first things that you said, Superintendent Peter, talking about when you look at the portrait of the graduate, that you're looking to kind of build, starting with these little guys, but real humans that are going out into the workforce and are going to be our coworkers and our neighbors. And to be able to start now is just so vitally important. Some things. I apologize that I referenced the beginning of the slide because I'm going to go all the way to the end. It's slide 27 if you don't mind. Right here, when we kind of talk about the per pupil expenditure, so that $19,000, does that mean that if an extra 10 kids kind of suddenly move into the district, that we would be spending $190,000 more?
For in-district, this number includes out-of-district placements as well, so, no, not really.
It's an
Yeah.
aggregate
Yeah.
based on the spending that occurs across multiple cost areas that's divided out by the number of students you have within your district. So it's not as easy to do apples to apples for like a person who walks into school. I mean, it's broadened out over the division of students you have based on the services and anyone charged to supporting the school district as well. So it's broader, like we talked about some of the other facilities and the other departments that help support it. So look at that from a net school spending standpoint. There's just other pieces. It's not as quick as a math problem.
Which I appreciate, because I know sometimes we kind of hear about that, and it kind of pops up and it says, well, if this plot of land is going to bring in this many kiddos, this is how much we can anticipate on increasing, and especially when we went to the reorganization. And now, because of that too, no need to jump around to the different slides, but when we kind of talk about like the number of students that we have within each of the classrooms as well, when we have 8 sections at some of our schools, it means that we could have 8 kids come on in the exact same grade, and it's just going to tick the numbers up from maybe 19 to 20. That overhead cost isn't automatically there. It's not an extra $75K for a whole other teacher. All these additional resources and expenditures. It allows so much more flexibility on top of the sustainability that we're building. And you're gonna kill me. If we can go back to 27. Thanks. And this one here, we kind of talk about the bottom 23rd percentile. And you've all the folks that mentioned it as well. It's just, it kills me when we look at like that 77% of other districts in Massachusetts are investing more per pupil than Franklin. This was something that 6 years ago kind of like activated me to start my journey here. When school committee member Tim Keenan started talking about 75% of other districts. I thought that was absolutely absurd. That 75% of other districts out there are investing more in our kiddos than what Franklin is, our per pupil expenditure. There was that one year where you kind of see that little uptick. And I remember Bob Dutch being right here during a FinCom meeting and saying, well, you know what, I'm not really sure exactly kind of what this means. Maybe we're investing more, maybe others are investing less, maybe it's an anomaly. We're going to have to wait to find out. And unfortunately now we've found out. And the truth be told is that we've just been slipping. And other districts continue to outpace us in just how they value their education and how they want to invest their tax dollars and where they do. It has nothing to do with the fact of just how incredible our staff is and our kiddos are, as my colleague Nadia, as you mentioned, like we saw with the Office of Teaching and Learning, we still have some incredible results when it comes to MCAS. We have amazing students and educators and an entire system built around that, but we don't have a community that is following suit with their wallet, and it's unfortunate that we just continue to slide and see other districts. I know we had the 351 ambassadors. When we see all those other 350 districts that are out there in valuing education more and investing in education more than Franklin is on a per pupil expenditure. It's disappointing, but I commend all of you for the work that you do and the results that you get in spite of that. Thank you.
Yeah, I think Dave said this really well, and actually it's piggybacking off a comment I made at the last meeting and building off of what Nadia said as well. We have been fortunate enough to sustain outperformance that the town has come to expect in our school systems. Being able to sustain that while sitting at the bottom 23rd percentile and dropping is not something we can do long term. It is something that we will run into issues. There will be a point in time where people start saying, well, why aren't we hitting those benchmarks anymore? And they're not going to point back to the year before, they're not going to point back to the budget that year. They're going to have to point back to now and identify why students are having trouble in 2030. There's a significant lag in that period of time. We have fantastic teachers, but if we're unable to recruit more fantastic teachers because we're unstable or because we're not properly funding all the needs that we have consistently, we're going to run into issues with that. And I'm really concerned that is when people are going to start realizing that we have to do something. And by that point in time, the cost to right the ship is going to be such a huge gap from where we are. There's going to be a lot of risk for us that we will, basically will have challenges being able to right the ship at all. It is also really disappointing. I know last year there was a lot of conversation around the importance of Horace Mann. We have a subcommittee involved with it. And to see that the birthplace of Horace Mann values their public education less than 75% of the state, it is really kind of a hard thing to swallow, knowing how much that matters to us. We're the first public library, we have Horace Mann, and yet kind of the institutions that really help build up that community from the educational standpoint, we have kind of on a knife's edge. I did want to kind of jump into just a few points of clarification from the value. One thing is when we're talking about the net school spending and the state support, the concept of wealth comes up a lot. This came up a lot during the override discussions as well. And I think one of the most consistent comments that was said is that land doesn't pay tax, or land doesn't pay for groceries. So basically when taxes go up, or when you're not getting as much support and you're considered a wealthy town because of the value of the land, that doesn't help anyone in the town in their day-to-day. And I think that's very important to note. And I definitely agree, the grass out back is not particularly tasty. My kids agree. But what this required local contribution does is it weights those details very well. So actually the income is very, very heavily weighted in this calculation. Land value is present, but at a very decreased level. So there is that recognition of they're trying to right-size this according to what people actually are able to bring in when they're looking at what people are going to contribute. It's not just property values have gone up, explosively over the past 5 years, therefore everyone can pay more. No, they look at what the income levels have actually done, and I think Franklin has seen a very big shift over the past 10, 15 years that has really kind of come to the fore now. But it is something that if the state is making this calculation based on what we're required to contribute, it's based on what we're actually making versus how much the house is. And then actually an interesting point, Paula, I think you had mentioned we get the value above circuit breaker if we have students in district for some of our special needs programs.
Yes, do we get circuit breaker reimbursement?
Yes. That's awesome.
Yes.
So I want to kind of build on that because that is actually I thought we actually we would forego that money if we didn't send students out of district.
We have a few students. We have a handful.
So that's really, really important and fantastic. And I think this slide really highlights this for everyone. We see that their reimbursement amounts go up year to year. The cost for that goes up even more just by the sheer, the structure of that overall program. But actually, if we go to the slide, to Paula's slide.
16.
Thank you. That brings this even, I think it's a highlight that we just have now touched on, where we have this district savings where it is the kind of the what you consider the true savings. We're saving the district $1.7 million by bringing in highly specialized educators to drive home the ability to educate these students in districts. This is something that many districts cannot do, but we are able to, and it's something that as was discussed in December, is really a big a big focus for us because it's important that students are able to be educated in the town they live in. And really, I think there it's another step where there's kind of two other thoughts there. Instead of just saying, oh, we saved this much because we're not sending a student out, we are actually getting reimbursed. We're able to bring this very high quality education to students who normally would have to be sent out of district. We're able to make sure that they're, the environment is much more enriching and much more positive. You did share some wonderful stories in December. We're also getting paid more by the state for that. And that's going right back into our system instead of going to just pay for what we had to send out of system and out of district anyway. It also is something where, and we've talked about this before, I know that, Mr. Gary comments on how we have to make sure that we stabilize things. 1 year is not stable. I know there's a series, a period of time. But in looking at how, how these offerings are recognized, I do know that we have other districts who have commented on just how fantastic this
We just had an
environment
inquiry
is.
last week about bringing a kid from another district, tuitioning a student that we're considering because we do have room in one of our programs.
And things like this are where I think people need to remember just how valuable an education system is. I think no one in here looks at students as a dollar sign, but in a realistic setting, when we are talking about the budget, it's one of the few times I think morally it's gray, so we'll kind of jump in it. If you're able to tuition in a student, let's just say, because I have no idea who this, what's going on here, let's just say it's the NEC program. For us, that cost is $84,000, $85,000 rounding. If that school were to send them here, that's money that's coming directly to us, supporting a program that we already have that we're supporting for our students. So essentially, perpetuating that system, allowing us to really sustain it. All of it's coming in, which is fantastic. Great. Again, we no longer are experiencing the circuit breaker window. So that $53K that we would not be able to collect, we're collecting from another district. And on top of that, we're able to provide and support our fellow districts who are no longer spending $237,000 to send a student out of district when they can send it to another local school district, able to support them for a third of the cost. So really reinforcing it and supporting the broader educational system as we go. So I'm really excited to hear that we do get those reimbursements in addition to the fact that we have people, recognizing just how high quality these programs are. And I look forward to kind of, continuing to hear it. And if we're able to finally stabilize things, I would like to see what more we can do there.
Just two comments on that. One, it was part of the request over last budget season to have 2 elementary student services admin was around providing the leadership and support you need to have 4 or 5 programs existing in one complex. You need someone dedicated to be able to do that because the principal is overseeing 500 students with an assistant principal at the elementary level. At the middle school, there's 1,000 kids, right? And you have 2 assistant principals. All the ratios match K to 12. The goal being, that was part of the ask, was to have additional support to be able to help stabilize these programs. That's one thought. The other point, and I would build off of what you said, Dr. Griffith, was the inverse could also happen. We could be educating a Franklin student who mid-year moves out of town. And then there's a chance or an opportunity on the other end, if we were stable, to say, hey, town that now is responsible, we already know this kid, they're already in our program. There's opportunities to think of the inverse to say, we'll keep them, but we're going to charge you. Do you know what I'm saying? So this isn't about trying to, and I appreciate your comments around, it's not about doing in-district programming to generate revenue, but there are scenarios where if it makes sense and it's communicated and it's prepared and it's done thoughtfully and you have the right systems and supports in place to support that, then that's an option. It's not going to dig us out of the rising cost of special education across the state, because we see in the budget that you have in front of you and you'll see in future budgets, those increases are large. It won't, but every little bit counts. I think that's a sentiment that we all share, and we want to be thoughtful and strategic about that. And that's one example. We're looking at other areas we've talked about. You can expect a more detailed presentation on staff childcare in the coming months. There's a couple of other areas where it's like, what can we do? And I think I'd love to see at some point where we put up a one-pager with all the ways we've tried to be creative. The Learning Institute, right now, it's a startup company, if you will. Let's get some other districts involved and come in to experience it, but then who knows what that can do. I think there's just so many different ways where I feel like when Randy Moss went to Bill Belichick, it's like, just if you let me run down the field, I'll catch the ball. Do you know what I mean? So I think that's the attitude we have, And I don't know if it was Warren Buffett, but you can't cut your way into thriving as an organization either. So I think there's a flip side to that. And I don't think we're alone in that in this town, and I would say my other department leaders and town administrator and everyone, we're all feeling the same pressure around the amount of money coming in and what we're using it to afford. So I think we're in the same boat in that regard. And then we're also in our own boat when it comes to education and the context we provided as we relate to the states. So it's like two different layers to this, but ultimately, those are the follow-up comments that I just would make to round off the conversation.
And I really appreciate those. I think it helps everyone kind of see exactly where we're at. So I do want to say, do we have any other questions? Let's just never got short of it. So what I figure is, it sounds like most folks are pretty much finishing up with their questions. So run through them, have fun. 9:25. But then after that, I'll just kind of sum up. And then I would like to just kind of open it up briefly. I think there's an opportunity if people do want to have, if we have any citizens that want to make a comment, just give them a couple of minutes on this topic. Where they can comment, and it's not necessarily a moment for us to be able to engage back, but we can take those notes, we can look to respond in due time. So, Reese?
Well, you'll be happy to know I've only got one question left. I do have a little bit that I wanted to add to what you had said and what the Vice Chair had said about that required local contribution. That's again on slide 27. The question I opened our round of questions with was about how. Oh, I'm sorry. Slide 29 is the slide. It is about essentially this budget is met if we get our required local contribution. And what happens if we don't meet our required local contribution? And what Ms. Malati shared is that we risk enforcement actions by the Attorney General, which I would only assume would cause us more expenditures, more effort and labor to comply with those enforcement actions. Loss of state aid, meaning every dollar we don't get means maybe that's $1.50 or so that we're cutting from the budget. Quite frankly, we wrote a letter, the town council wrote a letter about hold harmless and how important it is. If I were working for the state and a town comes to me and says this hold harmless is so important, and then I look and they're not even doing what they're meant to do, I mean, I'm not going to think favorably about that at the very least. So we need to take that into account, that if we don't meet this required local contribution, are we losing a lot more than receiving? And finally, one of the potential consequences is non-approval of a municipality's tax rate. And tax rate has been a real topic of conversation here in Franklin. Clearly, the residents don't want their tax rates going up. I think they would like even less if the state was coming in and saying, guess what we're going to do with it. Because that's what that looks like to me, that if we don't get this required local contribution, that's potentially what is going to happen. So let's make the decisions for our town that we need to help our schools stay healthy and to keep us in control of our own destiny. So with that said, my other question is pretty light, honestly, but it goes to slide 6. And Ms. Malati, I'm sorry, this was something that I had touched base with you about beforehand that you had just had an answer that I think is worth hearing. So this awesome staircase graphic, I had asked about the top tier there, technology and equipment. What kind of assessment was done and what changes were made as a result of looking at technology and equipment?
Yes, so as Mr. Jagir mentioned previously, as part of our budget process, every year we meet with each department head and principals and go over the requests line by line. The same happened with the technology department. And our technology director, Mr. Tim Raposa, he was able to identify areas of efficiency, such as a contracted services line for our printer contract. We were able to save a little over $20,000 compared to FY26. He was also able to secure a grant that covers costs from some software licensing. So at the end of the day, when you look at the technology request for FY27, it's almost $80,000 less than it was in FY26.
Well, that's fantastic, and thank you to Mr. Esposa for those efforts, and of course, those things as well. No further questions, Chair.
If I could add, Vice Chair Callahan mentioned if we had a magic, I don't know how you framed it, but basically if we had wants and needs, the technology director has presented on his budget, and if there was more money, he had provided what he would do to grow the department and whatnot. So I think that's a context. I think every school, but technology falls under schools and also is in that boat. And there are needs, but ultimately trying to come to the table with a disciplined budget was one of the goals that we put forth this particular year as we look to try to move forward with the core services that we're providing today. There are needs. It's just I want to make sure it's clear that point. So.
Just one question and then a comment. Sorry. Just the revenue grants page for all of the grants that are listed there. Are these guaranteed year to year? Are we absorbing the innovation career pathways, or is it going away?
So the innovative career pathways, that money, we used it to start up, if you will. We have built it in our budget to continue to provide that in perpetuity as part of our process. The systems, you saw some presentations from FHS the other day. That's part of the plan based on the request that we have in front of you tonight. That's one. The second piece is, I'll let Ms. Malati hit on this a little bit, around the grants. On the right-hand side, it's very broad, but specifically your question is around, are those grants, what's the probability we continue to see those? Is that the question?
Yes.
So the entitlement grants, title grants, and the IDA grants, the first and second grants are special education related. I recently was a part of a DESE webinar, and they did reiterate that FY27 we will see those grants that I listed. That's why I didn't list any other grants, because we do not have any certainty that we are going to receive them. And I listed FY26 amounts just because we don't know the allocations for FY27, but it's usually pretty close.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
And that's great to hear. I'm sorry, I have to go back to slide 6. No, we were just there.
Just point on this. This came up. Some of these were under threat over the summer. I mean, federal austerity,
Yeah.
just comments made politically, put some of these at risk. We were able to, I think it was more words, but they were referenced at times around grants freezing, around that. So I would also add that I agree with you, but I just would hate to be in a situation that we didn't say it in this moment, and then we're dealing with something in the summer and they say, wait a minute, you said that, just to know, on the whim of, things can change as we realize. Just a moment in time. The 2022 me would have just kept moving, but I'm trying to grow and evolve. All right.
Just last few comments. I appreciate the staircase. I think, we've heard so much, especially over the last few years, about the community wanting examples of transparency, efficiency. What is every department doing to demonstrate that? This right here is a perfect demonstration of everything the school department has been doing and continues to do, especially with the restructuring. For all of those still wondering, was this restructuring a good idea? I mean, just look at the slides, look at the class sizes, all of these factors that went into it to compile that savings of 3.1 that's getting compounded. I can't even imagine the dollar amount that we would be asking for and the budget deficit that we would be in right now had we not restructured. And this is just proof in the pudding of all of the pieces that we are going from the ground up to evaluate on a yearly basis. Hopefully not, gone through every year, but essentially, checking in with our faculty members and administrators to do this deep dive into each of these categories. I can't emphasize I mean, if anybody in the community wanted an example of who is being efficient, it is this department. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Now, you sure you didn't find anything?
Yeah, no, good. I'm good.
Yeah.
You know, again, I think when the high school kind of presented, so like one of the key words was innovation, and this one over here, really sustainability. You know, in terms of the 2.5% for the operating budget increase is something that is sustainable based on anybody who's been a part of the budget and override conversations kind of know and understand how you address the revolving accounts and ensure the sustainability of that, you know, now and in the future is fantastic. And even the work leading up to this, when we look at like the teacher contracts and 2.5%, you know, increase as well, it's all been built upon stability. And I say this, I truly hope folks at home as well hear that, that, you know, the school department has made a lot of cuts over the years. We made a lot of hard choices and decisions, especially when it comes to the reorganization, to provide millions of dollars of savings to the district. As my colleague mentioned, that imagine where we would be without that right now. But really, as we kind of look forward, it's also the key word I'm hearing is just sustainability. That the school district has made so many hard choices to put ourselves into this area that we are in now, that we can put forward and you know, approve hopefully a budget that is sustainable for all of Franklin as we kind of move forward. And especially as we kind of look towards like the ecosystem that we're in. And I appreciate that given like the financial realities that we are, and that it is a zero-sum game as we're looking at all the other town departments. But it's been said so many times, I've heard over the years, that we are one Franklin, coming together to try to present this sustainable budget as we move forward. It goes to the FinCom, as it goes to town council, and they have to then make those decisions across every other department to try to create just the best Franklin that we can. We're all moving together as one. And we want to compliment as well, I'm sure other folks are watching on YouTube, maybe home or later as well, but I also see, you know, kind of speaking about that one Franklin idea, that we got some town councilors here. You know, Councilor Callaway Tripp, Councilor Griffith, and in chambers, Councilor Morangello as well. I so greatly appreciate when we see those names, when we see those faces here in council chambers. It means so much because it is one big joint venture that we're all moving forward together. As we look at that path ahead to the FinCom, to the big budget hearings at town council, that we're all working together. And I truly hope that everybody continues to hear that message, continues to hear all of the hard choices that the school department has made to create a sustainable budget for all of Franklin, as we do work together to try to build a better one Franklin together. So, thank you. That's all.
I just wanted to kind of close with a couple of points and we'll open things up. So tonight, you know, we basically had this very large you know, presentation and conversation on the budget. At our next meeting, so on February 10th, we will be having a hearing, so a public hearing. This is a somewhat unique situation, especially for school committee. We only have one or two of these a year. And what this will be is an opportunity for anyone in the community to come and provide feedback. Everyone in the community, it's not just citizens' comments at the end, or you know, you make a comment, that's kind of it. There's an opportunity for real kind of give and take in that meeting. So anyone who has questions on it, anyone who would like to really make comments, be heard, or provide feedback, that is a wonderful opportunity and a protected right for each one of us in the community to be able to get up and talk. So if you want that opportunity to make sure you show up and you have an opportunity to chat, that's your chance. Circle the date, February 10th. After that, actually on the 11th, we will be then looking at the revised budget with town council. So I know Lucas will be providing that information there. And all the information that we have for that public hearing will be coming out, I believe, on the 6th. So there'll be a live link. Anyone will have access to it. You can see the line by line. We've heard this question, we've heard this request from lots of folks. Show us exactly where every single thing is. We want to go line by line. It is public. It has been public every single year. It is all there. Every single line item is there. And if you have specific questions on what a line item is, again, public hearing, great opportunity to come in, ask about something in particular, and get that response. So, you know, it's really, everything is in front of us here, everything is in front of the community, everyone has the opportunity to really understand what is going on when we're talking about these funds. So I encourage folks to get engaged from that perspective. So, that being said, as I mentioned earlier, I do want to open up the floor to anyone either in council chambers or online if they had any questions or any kind of comments directly about the budget. I do want to limit this to about 3 minutes just because we have other things to discuss tonight. But if anyone does have something they want to say online, make sure you just raise your hand, and in person, please come up to the mic, state your name and your address, please.
Hello, my name is Max Marangella. I live at 127 Central Park Terrace. Am I allowed to ask questions, or is this just a comment period?
I think you can ask them. We don't necessarily have the ability to answer immediately.
The same goes for the superintendent?
Through me, if it's on topic, I think we can have a couple of relevant ones.
So I just wanted some information about, first off, I wanted to thank you for doing a great job in terms of zero-based budgeting, being innovative with special education programming. You're doing a lot of great work. I did have a question in terms of utilization rates for the schools. Because, you know, as a counselor, I'm looking at different departments, looking at their utilization rates, trying to compare apples to apples the best I can. It's not always easy. What is the class sizes and student faculty ratio for this year compared to the previous year? Is it?
This year, we were able to, and I'll try to jump to the slide that might hit on this, Councilor Marangella, let me just pull up. This is really hard to read, so I apologize in advance. This was an attempt to try to put together an example of our staffing for next year as we prepare. So when you divide out the number of students that we have, the class averages, we're looking at averages between, I see 21, I see, and then if you look at your K1 and 2, those are your most dependent learners versus independent. So the class sizes are recommended to be smaller. So you'll see 18.9, 21.8, 21.4. So what we've been able to do through the reorganization is put more sections of a grade level in a building versus the old model, the previous model, where we had 5 elementaries, but some schools might only have 2 K classrooms. So when you start getting move-ins or move-outs, the shifts for averages change quite dramatically. In this particular model, you're looking at 7 to 8 sections of each grade are at the elementary levels. So when shifts of enrollment happen, we're able to sustain it. But honestly, if you look at these we built this budget within the guidelines of the recommendations, which are listed on this page that you can see. It's between 18 to 22 for all K1 and 2 classrooms, and then 20 to 24 for all of our 3 through grade 12 classrooms.
So do you know what it was like either last year before the reorganization? Was it lower, higher?
Point of clarification,
Yeah.
I think one of the things being asked here is the specific capacity at each school.
No,
versus just the
I
classroom.
don't care about each school. I'm talking about in
Yeah.
total. If you, yeah.
28 and something.
This did stabilize. Chair.
Yes.
This did stabilize us.
It did stabilize. There were class sizes of upwards of 28 in certain schools. So that's where we had some discrepancy across elementary schools, where some schools had a class size of 28 because they only had 2 sections and they were move-ins, and another school might have had class sizes at 21. And I think that was part of the inequity we were experiencing. So yes, I think if I was to average it, I can look at last year's, and probably if someone was online now, they could look at previous budgets to try to look at that. But yeah, we had a large discrepancy between schools.
I just
More than that capacity, higher utilization.
And in terms of you looked at the the percentile compared to the state. And when I was in school, it was even lower. It was scary. We had 2008, according to Franklin Matters, we had 40 students in a Franklin High School class. So it's gotten better. It's still bad. It still needs work, and I want to get us to average. But I just, when I'm comparing apples to apples, if I see utilization going down for the schools and up for the police and up for the seniors and up for, it makes it hard as a counselor to try to deal with that. So, any data you can provide would be very helpful in trying to make that comparison. And one last thing is...
Can I just answer that one comment, just through the chair? We will provide in the budget book more information on this slide particularly to try to illustrate it a little better. The one thing I would say from a school department standpoint, we have seen enrollment decline. So when you see less educators, Some of it is due to educating less students over that time period where we kind of hit our peak capacity at, I don't remember the exact number, but say it was 6,000 students. When you drop down to 4,000, that's 2,000 less kids. So by nature, we would see our staffing levels decrease because we are a human business educating kids. So when that number goes down, the staffing ratio, enrollment-based reductions would have occurred and did occur. So that's just a point I would point out as we've seen kids decline. We are stabilizing now. So just to point that out, we're starting to plateau from the McKibben report and the demographics. We're starting to level out at the elementary, which will continue into the middle and the high. And then we'll start to see an uptick, but that won't happen until 2030 something.
And I want to make sure we're looking at long term too as well. So,
Yep.
the one last question was regarding attrition. If you were required to make attrition related cuts, what is your capacity if that were to happen?
So point of information, attrition isn't usually a directed cut. This is something that is not always predictable.
Right.
So we can't force attrition.
So
Like if there are cuts, like in theory, all it would be is essentially not backfilling a role, but you can't go in and say, all right, great, you guys are retiring now. We don't have that kind of control. Attrition is more so a natural progression where as people do retire, as people leave the district, we don't backfill that. The challenge is that you don't have full control over who's leaving.
Right.
So if it is someone at a central point that you really, like, that has to be filled, we don't have the flexibility to just say, all right, we're reducing costs through attrition. We need to fill that. So that's where the real challenge around that is you don't have the predictability or the control. And it may be that you're actually in a much worse position because of that attrition that has to go back and resolve.
Through the chair, just a point of clarification, to add on would be attrition could also be if you have a retirement of someone who is a veteran employee that you've had for many years, and then you hire their replacement, and they're a newer employee, new to the role. That's an example of small ball attrition, but just to give context, that's more typical than us not backfilling a typical, like a classroom teacher decides to retire, but we've built them into but we need to replace them. The only difference could be a small amount based on.
But you don't have any vacancies now that you don't have to fill that way.
We have 9 current vacancies. That was hot off the press when you asked the question. So we have 9 vacancies that are unfilled on the website right now. You can go to and see. When we built out this budget model, we went off the number of students we have to educate and then how many staff we need. So I think we're going to be providing more detail. I just would say we're going through the process, and I think I tried to hearken on this a little bit around presenting you a budget in January requires us by the date of the hearing to have communicated and clarified all of the just enrollment-based, staffing. So that's coming. So I can say to you that more information is coming, but we're working really hard, and we built the budget based on the number of students we're educating today and providing the same level of service for the core academic or core programming across the district.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you very much. All right. Coming in early tonight.
Relatively speaking, and I hope you're going to have an early night too. Steve Sherlock, 13 Minute Drive, Community Information Director. Could have that page picking up on the FinCom question in terms of the economics of development, and you went through the overall capacities. That is, to me, the key, and I know it's been talked about a couple of times tonight in terms of the capacity of available, so you could add, because of the averages, if there's 24 but there's 22, you could add 1. So 7 or 8 students in a particular grade in a particular building without adding another teacher. Now, assuming they're all the average students, they may have had special ed requirements, etc. This also, I think, because of the budget coming up, hasn't been mentioned specifically, but I think school choice is an opportunity for us to reconsider. Now that we have some of these capacities available across the board, previously with the prior district, you didn't have that kind of setup because the district, again, in that elementary, you had 5 buildings, you didn't know exactly where they were going to be. Now you've got 2 buildings. The odds are gonna be a little bit easier to go there. Future consideration, but it came to mind. Revolving funds, and I know I've mentioned it before, but the revolving funds from a town perspective are very equivalent to the enterprise funds. Water, sewer, trash. It goes into water, goes into sewer, doesn't go anywhere else. Similarly here, and I know they've said, the only point I would try to make is, you have continually, at least 5 or 6 years, violated your own policies by not maintaining the 1 year's worth. Ask the town when they have ever violated their policy on any of their enterprise funds. Just for grins, find out when that is. The radar chart, I think, page 23. One of the pieces where the special ed comparison seems to be a little bit higher. I would speculate, based on the conversations and based on the information, because we have so many other in-house programs that other districts don't have, that's why that's more compared to the state. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Anyone else online? Now that we've opened things up, again, just raise your hand. Okay. All right, let's continue on.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. On again. Quick. Right, so we have some policy discussion action items for you that were in your packet. Just get situated here. So we have a policy that is up for second read, which means adoption. I don't know if this committee has adopted a policy yet as a full group. Since you have?
No.
Okay, you have. So this is where we talked about a few months ago, policies go for a first read at one meeting, you provide feedback questions sometimes it's pretty clear and you're ready to move forward, and then we return at the next meeting to do the second read. And this is where if you take a vote of action tonight, it would become your policy. And we would embed it into the policy manual, and we would use it to make operational decisions as you need it. So just context for new members and the community of how this works. So there are 2 before you tonight. One is the second read, and I will just read it out loud. It's been in your packet, and you saw it at the last meeting. I recommend adoption of policy IHAIA, middle school pathway exploration as discussed.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Second. All right, discussion? Keith?
Yeah. So this is mainly for the education purpose of the 8th graders, just to say, hey, there is a CTE as well as the vocational courses. It's just the educational.
Yes, and Dr. Rogers, you want to just provide a brief answer?
Sure, yes. It's an obligation that we have to inform them of the opportunities available to them, and also articulates a few kind of specific ways that we share information with families, that we allow different schools that our students have an opportunity to apply into to come into the school to share their information with students. And then also there's some release of student information that parents would have to approve for us to then provide to the schools.
Thank you.
Questions?
No? Good. Questions? None? Please? Dave? All right. Roll some. All right. Seeing no further questions, the vote will come on a motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay. Next, we have a policy for first read. This is a recommended moving this policy BL, remote participation, to a second reading as discussed. Dr. Rogers, do you want to tee this one up?
Sure, and I would turn it over to Vice Chair Callahan. You might want to, I can
No,
start, but.
absolutely. So, yeah, this was something that actually kind of came up just as we were during our first policy meeting, and just kind of like talking about different policies that are out there and how some haven't been reviewed in quite some time. This was one of them. Remote participation, we were following the letter of the law, but not following our policy. Our old policy had been updated since COVID. Talked about like you can only have one person remote at a time, no executive session in remote, a whole bunch of other stuff that since COVID, the State House had passed some couple of series of laws that really expanded remote participation. This policy here just brings it in line. And then you can kind of see at the bottom of the policy, it has like direct links to the Mass General Law that talks about it, along with MASC did a quick little FAQ that also explained remote participation. And again, so everything we were doing was legal. Our policy just hasn't caught up to that. So this brings us in line. Happy to field any questions.
Any questions from the committee? All right. Seeing none, vote will come on the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, next we have ECDC tuition rates. So you may recall this from last meeting. When we reviewed the minutes, because there was some discussion around process, if you remember, we had a brief moment where some votes took place, but according to the minutes when we received.
Can I pause for a second? Because we just did that again.
We did.
We did. Thank you. I was like,
And I'm not
we
sure
did.
you did,
The first one we did correctly.
Okay.
First one we're good. No, yeah.
Okay.
Because as soon as we start with the presentations, we make an assumption. So I'm gonna step back for a second.
Okay.
So for the second, the first reading, as discussed, for removing policy BL, I'd like to entertain a motion.
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? We didn't have any first reading.
Change the vote now.
All right, so seeing none, vote will come in a motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. There we go. Okay. So, now please.
Thank you. So based on the tuition review that we did last week, it was a late night, if you recall, there was conversations around tuition and then the votes, and we, in reviewing of the minutes, want to make sure that we just do this correctly and make sure that we have a formal vote, just to be in accordance with the rules. So I think that meeting, there was some open discussions and it created some dialogue, and then we never really tied the bow around like the idea of getting to a vote on this particular action. So that was one piece that we want to share. So what we will do is, I'll recommend it again to you, and we answered a question, didn't we? The Tri-County question.
Can we get an answer?
Right, so.
So before we get into all that, let's go ahead and I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the ECDC 2026-2027 tuition rate as discussed.
So moved.
Second? Okay. All right, discussion?
Thank you. Now we can have a discussion. So basically, the Tri-County, we did some research into this. They offer a 3-day preschool, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday mornings, typically 8:30 to 11:30. Their tuition rate for the 25-26 school year, tuition is listed as $45 per week for the 3-day program. So when you look at that, they have some non-refundable $25 fee and enrollment for at least 3-year-olds by September 15th in order to get into the program. As far as cost comparison goes, do you have the number?
It's much lower.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's much lower.
It's significantly lower.
It's also, there's some student involvement in their program, correct?
Yes, yes. It is, their cost for it's a 3-hour, 3-day program, so is only $1,600 for the year. So significantly lower, but
Just wanted to answer that question.
Yeah.
it's not comparing apples to apples.
Can you go ahead?
So anything else? from
I have nothing else. That was just the answer. There was, it was a question asked by one of our school committee members. Steve, you had asked the question, so we wanted to make sure that we provided it. And we still would move forward with our recommendations. We think of the other comparables that we had within that list. So I recommend approval of the ECDC tuition for 26-27 school year as discussed.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, discussion?
Yeah, the comparison, sorry,
You're all set.
yeah, the comparison seems to be way higher. So is there anything that we can do for this, or we're gonna stick to the number that we come up with?
At this point, we did reduce it from what it was, and after doing the math on what it costs to operate the program is how we landed where we landed. It's not to say that this isn't revisited as we do zero-based budgeting and look every year at our processes, but at this point, in order to continue to provide the program as it exists, that was why this recommendation came based on the numbers.
So just one recommendation, so there should be definitely some kind of program comparison that can be done, just for educating families to show, okay, what we are doing differently.
Yes.
That would help to know that, no, we are paying high because we're getting a different program.
Experience. Okay.
So that experiences, right? So that's something we should be able to share it with the families, so that, they won't look at the cost directly. That's my
Understood.
opinion, yeah.
Thank you for the feedback.
Anyone else? No? Excellent. All right, so vote will come on the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, that was good feedback. So discussion only items, we have two in front of you tonight. The first is the monthly financials. It was getting late last meeting, we made some adjustments just to continue. That's in your packet. Happy to answer any questions that you may have from that document.
Any questions from anyone? All right, excellent. Please continue.
Okay. All right, moving on. So this is the item we referenced in the budget. It's school healthcare. So we wanted to just talk through this with the committee, allow for an open conversation. Some of you asked some really good questions during the presentation, but ultimately, as part of our ongoing discussions related to school and municipal budget and long-term financial alignment, the district has been working with the town administrator and town leadership with HR and their finance department to explore the transfer of the school department healthcare costs to the school, from the school department budget 300 to the centralized healthcare benefits line, which is healthcare line 910. This proposed change would centralize all municipal healthcare administration and premium allocations under one department, aligning the school department with other municipal departments. The intent is to improve consistency, efficiency, and transparency on how healthcare benefits are administered and budgeted across the entire town for all employees that work for the town of Franklin and the Franklin Public Schools. Some key considerations were around looking at a single point of administration for all the municipal healthcare, looking at some of the streamlined enrollment, renewal, payroll, accounting processes, and reducing some duplication of effort that are occurring by both the school business department now and HR, and the town business department now and their HR. The next was timing, just thinking about the school and municipal employees are transitioning to the Group Insurance Commission, which is GIC. I referenced the acronym earlier. Health insurance, that will happen on July 1st. It's right in line with our fiscal year turnover. And this proposal aligns with that transition so that we could ensure that as the healthcare administration and the budget are being fully centralized, they would be implemented on the same timeline as this change. There's already a lot of shifting that needs to happen for our employees in both departments in order to get the GIC transition to occur. So it just seems as though while you kind of open up the books to look at that moment. And it's important to note that this proposal does not change employee healthcare plans, coverage levels, or collective bargaining obligations. And the proposed change is limited to where the expenses is budgeted and administered. That's really, it's a line item and a budget impact in moving it into one centralized location. Finally, under the structure, the school committee would formally vote to approve a transfer before any healthcare expense line can be removed from the school department budget at submission and incorporated into the Department 910. And this item is included not only for discussion tonight, as just no action taken, but discussion, and ultimately from this conversation, we would recommend to move it towards an action item at a future agenda item, and particularly the next agenda, if we want it to be in line with the budget process, because when we build the budget book, knowing this information would be helpful so that we build an accurate book if the decision is to move it, which we have put forth for discussion tonight, and we've highlighted. We're happy to answer any questions that we can tonight. And if we can't answer it, we will get the answer and get that back to you as well. Okay?
Thank you very much. And before I open it up to everyone, just want to make sure the public's aware, we will be holding a special meeting next week, basically same time, different place. It will be online only, so through Zoom, where we'll be voting on only this topic. The idea is that tonight we have an opportunity to ask questions. If there are any questions that aren't able to be answered tonight, we'll be able to have them answered prior to our vote. But that timing is special because it allows us to have a single budget book for the hearing. If we did not do that, Jonna gets to do everything twice. She gets to publish everything twice and or print it out twice if somebody really wants that. And it really is a significant amount of work and effort. So if we have that vote next week, as we currently have scheduled, it allows us to create a singular budget that we're all then able to review more effectively. So just putting that out there. Any questions that you have that are not answered tonight, we do have time to revisit. So yeah, did that on purpose to make sure that we have enough information. All right. That being said, any questions from the committee? Reese?
Oh, this seems like a no-brainer to me. I'm curious about the reasons they were separated in the first place. Is it just kind of a legacy thing of how it used to be budgeted? And I see lots of nods, so maybe the question's answered.
Yeah, I'll share a story later. Can I just share Nelson? No one thinks I'm being weird. My grandfather had moved out to go to assisted care. My uncle was cleaning out the house, and he found a Franklin Public Schools newspaper that showed in the 60s the superintendent had to turn the heat down to 63 to save money in the budget. There's a picture of the superintendent turning the knob on the wall. I was thinking about legacy and how decisions happen and like where we're at. I can't go back in time that far. That's the only reference I have to how it happened. But I do think that this has lived in the school department as long as I've known and been around. So ultimately, it's just something that has never been merged. I will say other types of services like DPW, like grounds, facilities, are all items that were separate at one time and then became merged. So I think that's a good question. I think I'll point that out in future meetings when I meet with the town and other groups around the perspective around, sometimes the question is asked very pointedly, like, do we pay for that for the schools as well? But I think it's important to know that when decisions are made, like healthcare, I would hate in 10 years to have someone say, so we pay for the school's healthcare as well, because it's in our budget now, and we have it budgeted, but to streamline for efficiencies, that's why these mergers have happened over time. I think it's about trying to say, for the same reasons, insert different department, why duplicate efforts on grounds and taking care of them? Let's have one group with one leadership handle that. But, so when I think the perspective is that being done for us as a favor? No, it's part of like, hey, someone made some really intentional decisions in the past to streamline these departments. So that's the idea here. And I appreciate the historical question because this is something that when you do this, the healthcare line and the funding that's in healthcare for school departments would migrate into one. The money goes with the healthcare. Does that make sense? So that's why I just think it's never been something that's been discussed, but other areas we have seen that. We keep technology. My thoughts on that are municipal technology and employee technology is much different than school-based technology. There's so many layers to those pieces. It falls under us. We make up a large percentage of most of the departments that are referenced, but I think it's all in context too. We have had our own division of some of these areas before, but made intentional decisions to move them to become consolidated. I think there are benefits to seeing it streamlined, and this is one example of all of our employees are under one roof. So there's my soapbox.
Well, very good, thank you.
Yep.
And we'll work on getting you that thermostat photo out.
I had the same question, that's why I was nodding my head. But I agree with all the considerations. My only question is there a reason why we should keep it under our purview versus shifting it that I'm not taking?
I would just say, one would be just to control the line, but ultimately staff who choose to take health insurance varies by person, depending on whether they can pick it up from some other way. So I think it's highly variable on who accepts it. We always budget and prepare for people to take the health insurance because that's the most responsible thing to do, but you don't know necessarily who might take it and who might not. But I think that applies across the board and all. We met with, like I said, we've been meeting regularly, but we met with the town on this. We asked some of these particular questions, and I think we're all in the same boat with healthcare, which it's going up, it's rising. We have budgeted for it and projected out, and I think it would be projected out no matter where it lived. But ultimately, I do think what we learned through the listening tours was certainly conflating our request and our percentage increase, which I think led to the amount of attention that it received. I was initially someone who was like, pause, because one, I wasn't in the mindset to experience too much change. We're trying to redo a whole district, and like, I needed a minute to like finish the commitments we already made. But ultimately, as we get into this next year and look at that, that's, I think, how this came to be, was really looking at putting it under one roof, having it, it's already being supported and administered through a benefits coordinator. We do have pieces of our HR department and school business that contribute to the onboarding and some of the shifting that happens with healthcare. But there's an opportunity with us moving to the state healthcare system while it's open to try to look to align these things. So I think it's cleaner in the future too. If there are other budget discussions that happen around requests for increases, overrides, all those things, when it's really clear on operating budget costs. So I think there are some trade-offs to all these things. But we've talked as a team, we're in support of this, and we see potential to streamline some efforts here and continue to provide the services to our employees. And like I said, there's no change to the contracts, the healthcare plans, or anything like that. It's about where does this live within the structure of our own budget.
Thank you.
Al?
So I think it makes sense. I guess the question I have is, you mentioned that you budget for everybody to take it. What happens if the less people take the insurance, and like what happens to those budgeted funds?
So we don't necessarily budget for all of the employees to take, but how we budget is we take actual subscribers numbers, we build that up. Open positions, those are the positions that we do assume that they are going to take the high deductible family plan, just in case they do. If they don't, which it happens, that money can also support employees that decide to take on health insurance mid-year when enrollment opens, or when they change from an individual plan to a family plan.
Okay, but we'll say hypothetically, whatever you projected for enrolling, we have less than that amount. We'll say even number 100 people, right? You budgeted 70 people take it. At the end of the year, you still ended up with 70. What happens to that 30?
So that I want to stand corrected. What Ms. Bly is saying is we assume if 70 people took it currently, those same 70 people will take it in the future, not the 100.
Yeah,
and then if anyone new, we have a new position that comes on board, we assume that that new person entering Welcome to Franklin Public Schools is going to take the insurance because they have not elected not to. So I want to be clear, it's carrying over anyone with it, it moves into the next budget, and then is that, so it's just
so what I'm saying is you had 100 people last year that took it, so you're planning on 100 people this year to take it, but only 70 took it, and it never increased. It was stayed at 70 for the entire year. We're not accounting for people coming in or changing. What happens to that 30?
It's a good example. That's probably a high percentage that could conflate the. But the point is, if one, say it was like 3 people, I'm going to make this up, said, I need a family plan now, but then someone leaves and they don't take insurance. I think these are all things that we have to balance as we go. So that's why we try to go off of, here's what we know. You had this plan. The best information we have is you were already on a plan. Mr. Charles had a family plan. We're assuming he's going to move into next year with it. And then there is some variability, but the same thing, I think it can shift a few ways. Someone could elect not to take it, but then someone else could be coming on board to replace a retired person who then needs it. So I think those are the discussions we had with the town on. We're all in the same boat of trying to like target it the best we can, incorporate what we know the increase will be, and then make those decisions as they happen, mid-year, like there are adjustments that made, things like that. If you have a retirement in the middle of the year or something like that, that could be an impact. So I think those are the areas where it can come up, but I think we try to be as fiscally responsible as possible with what we budget for, particularly around healthcare, given the high increases involved with it. So, yeah, it's hard to predict because open enrollment means every employee has a chance. Just we haven't seen.
It is highly unlikely that you will see a drop in 30
It's
subscribers.
great,
Yeah,
and
but
I'm just
I-
using the numbers
yeah.
to keep it simple.
We do have mid-year hires that are unbudgeted for, so if they do take health insurance, majority of them opt in, so those remaining funds would help cover their costs.
Yeah, and I guess the crux of my question is, it's not just about the people, it's what happens to those funds, the excess funds that we budgeted for. That's really
Yeah,
where
so
I'm looking at.
we generally utilize pretty much every single dollar, regardless. And whatever it's excess, like we mentioned previously, $5,000–6,000, it goes back to the town. We do not transfer those funds to the revolving, it is not legal to do so.
Okay, thank you.
Just letting you know.
Good, thank you.
Yes, yeah.
Good.
I think you have a good point, because I think that's like what we heard from the town administrator when this became like a big talking point at the joint budget subcommittee, where he was like, careful what you wish for, because sometimes this can work out for you. So it's a valid point. Maybe before we vote on it, it's good to note, I don't know if you have this, because it wasn't line itemed out previously to when you took the position. It's kind of something we've done recently, but could we, and things may change because now we have this, what is it, the GIC broker. So my son's on a basketball team with the son of a firefighter in town, Kay Mullen, who is a big proponent who introduced the GIC, and we were sitting on the bleachers talking about, oh my God, we have a $2 million deficit this year. And he goes, well, it's not, we're saving $1.3 million because we're not gonna use that broker anymore. So I was wondering if, like, when we were managing our own healthcare, even though it was being negotiated by the administrator here, it was we were also, and I haven't validated this, so I was told, so maybe I shouldn't even bring it up, but like, I was told that we were paying a broker 1.3 million, and I'm just, that's savings, so now the deficit's only 700. So I guess I'm just kind of curious, do we have any historical, like, it would be good to know, have we had an extra 5,000 the past few years to maybe put in, teacher supplies or operating budget? Because to me, like, when I talk to the public and teachers that I know, as far as like what does the superintendent oversee versus what does the municipal side oversee, healthcare isn't an issue because it is for the whole town, it's all kind of negotiated the same. I get more pushback about like with facilities, the people in our school doing the work aren't being managed by our superintendent and overseen by our superintendent, where I don't think there's a big risk to, like, if we are trusting our superintendent to manage this, it'll be just as good whether it's under him or the town administrator or whoever, because the healthcare is just transferable. But it would be good before we do the final vote, because I think that's what I was getting at, is like, are we giving a little bit away for no good reason if it's not an extra burden for anyone, especially because now it's going to be outsourced to,
I would just say, I can't speak to the conversation you had on the basketball court,
Yes.
but I can say, we have talked, Ms. Bellotti has been working to build an MOU and an understanding, and we would provide that to you to show you as an example. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes, so in order to make an informed vote and also to, I guess, cover everybody, we are working on a memorandum of agreement, an MOA, that outlines schools' responsibilities, town's responsibilities, the usage of the funds, because we do have employees that work in the food service department, lifelong learning department. They are paid through the revolving funds, and their healthcare costs come out of the revolving funds. So we just want to make sure that everything's held out correctly, so that we we know how much is coming out, and that actually matches the premiums. We'll have this out for you guys before, I'll probably send it out in the next couple days, so you guys have time to review it. Our attorneys are also going to review it, and
And the town attorney.
the town attorney as well.
Thanks.
Key point that could have been mentioned at the beginning, but yes, that's the plan.
Yeah, yeah. And I've worked with you long enough now, John, that I know your eyes on the ball, so I appreciate the work you're doing on this to make sure that we're not losing ground at all, so thanks.
Definitely.
So just a quick question on the, if at all this moves to town, so is there any operational overhead that is going to be offset from an administration point of view?
No employee impact to schools as a result of the shift, and right now, the benefits coordinator services employees for both town and school. That is a position that exists within this, she's in this building, so we wouldn't lose any FTE as a result, so that it's really about the account itself and moving on. And we've had discussions internally with the town administrator, the town HR director, and the schools, the town business and finance leader with this team to talk through just some of these scenarios and hypotheticals. What would happen in this scenario? What if someone took insurance mid-year? And I think, I feel confident that we have some shared agreement around these shifts happen already in both of our departments, and really having it under one roof would not change that. And we have talked about and have assurances on just the adjustments that need to be made. So I think we'll lay that out for you. Ms. Malati will follow through and share the agreement with you, so you have the information, you have a chance to ask more questions. That's why it's only discussion. We weren't moving to try to push a vote. It's really about informing you all, who are ultimately the decision makers in this choice, but also the community at the same time. You can bring people along, and then it helps us to have a decision by the time we get those books built completely, because it will be really clear, and we don't want to confuse anybody. So whatever course we take, we want to make sure we're prepared for that in the time.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay. Say we vote on this, does town council have to vote to accept this change, or is it a done deal after the 3rd?
I don't believe they have to vote to, let me find out. I just know you oversee it currently, so I think the first vote in order would be that. I don't know that I will find out the answer, and I think our attorney, town attorney will know procedurally the right decision to make on that.
Okay, perfect, thank you. And then, just as what Alan they were kind of talking about as well, I remember that comment at the joint budget meeting from the town administrator saying, well, this is a reason why you might not want to make that change, kind of talking about this is the number of folks that are projected, but then maybe some don't take it, and then we move that money around. If we might, I know your day's already packed, pretty much a whole month of February is gone, I apologize, but maybe before the 3rd, if we might be able to say, even just last year, how much was kind of like projected, how many folks, how much money do we anticipate on utilizing healthcare, how many actually did, and what went towards non-healthcare things. Because if it went towards moving around, totally fine, but if there was a couple of bucks that maybe isn't gonna be there on the table as we move forward, it just might be helpful to know.
Okay.
But overall, I think this is a fantastic recommendation, especially, we spent the entire night, 10:30. We spent quite some time kind of talking about a 2.5% budget increase, because that's what we're asking for with the operational budget. And there are smarter folks than I that kind of looked past some historical data and said, you know what, the schools had, a 3.6% here, or this percent here, this percent here, but when you take out the health insurance and you actually compare it to all the other districts, or all the other departments that are out there, we're actually losing ground on many years, year after year after year, from an operational standpoint, because of this massive albatross that's kind of around our necks. So I love the recommendation. I'm so grateful that we're kind of moving forward on it, especially before those budget books get printed or digitally signed off on. And so thank you very much for bringing this up to us.
Yeah, I think being able to compare apples to apples is going to have a lot of value. I was a part of those joint budget subcommittee discussions, and in the same night we would have this discussion. We'd lay out, much to what Mr. Callahan says, some years we operationally go up 2.4% or 2.2% or 2.1%, but our overall budget was 3% and change. And everyone would, sit there, everyone would agree, everyone would say, great, we need to fix that, we definitely understand you guys are coming in at 2.5% or less. And then we get to, the actual vote, and it's like, all right, great, we're not gonna give them 3.5%. We're so close. We were there, we all agreed, we all aligned, had 8 joint budget subcommittee meetings, and then we'd still lose as soon as we weren't in the room to really kind of say, great. Yes, our health insurance increases are large. As we pointed out, we're all experiencing the same thing. Our operating budget is even more constrained because of that. We were never really able to lean into that. So I do hope that we have an opportunity to do so and really kind of go in on an even playing field with everybody else and show how fiscally responsible we have been over an extended period of time. So I appreciate this and look forward to that discussion. And again, if anyone has any other questions that come up between now and then, feel free to send an email. Again, the idea here is that we have plenty of time to get the information that we need. Excellent. All right, proceeding on. Next up, we have school committee subcommittee reports and liaison reports. So, first and foremost, so superintendent evaluation, still a little bit early for this. We will be getting into this in another couple of months as we get closer to the back end of the year. So no updates at this point. Budget, we did meet before the last meeting to review some of the details that were shared tonight. So I think everyone's pretty well up to date there. Some great questions and adjustments to how things were presented, so really appreciate the subcommittee's efforts there. We'll be meeting in 2 more meetings before the second meeting in February. Policy?
Yeah, we got our next meeting, February 10th. I don't know if I mentioned this in the last one, but Al put together this amazing spreadsheet that really kind of highlighted when we talk about those policies that haven't been reviewed in a while. He went through every single policy. It's a lot. And really kind of tracked it to say, these batch have been kind of reviewed within the last 3 years, these ones 4 years, and these ones I think that's 15 plus. So we have a lot of great stuff that we're working on, some that's already kind of been in the pipeline, some that kind of brought up, talked about state championship signs and policies around that, but we're also really going to be working off that spreadsheet to start to whittle down so there's less policies on the books that haven't been touched for quite some time. So and again, February 10th, 6 o'clock, right upstairs before this next meeting.
Excellent, thank you. Media relations, Charles?
Yep, so we had met on the 12th of January, where we talked about our goals, plans for the upcoming newsletter, different engagement ideas that we're going to be trying to do this year. Our next newsletter is going out the 5th, which is next week, crazy. And then we'll be meeting on the 9th of February for next meeting.
Excellent, thank you. Horace Mann Legacy Subcommittee, Ms. Halsey?
With the chair's permission, as you know, I have handed over the reins of the subcommittee to Dave Callahan, who's done an exceptional job. But I will just give the last update. So we had a Google Doc put out just after the holiday accepting applications, and we got a handful of applications. How many did we get? 9? So we actually voted at the meeting to accept all 9. So we are going to have a committee of 17 instead of 12 as originally discussed. And maybe even one more, because we did have a middle school student, and I believe there will be a high school student joining, so. And what else should I add?
The middle school and high school student are already accounted for in that 17. So if we end up not getting a student, then it could go down to 16. But
So it's awesome.
The 17 accounts for the 5 additional at-large that we were accepted over the originally intended for.
Right. So Dave and Bruce picks up the slack because I had a lot of family obligations going on, and that's part of the reason for this, because it's such a massive community-facing committee, so I just want it done excellent, but I'll obviously put in a lot of effort. But I'm really excited because the responses we got were overwhelmingly enthusiastic. People really want to be a part of this, and it's a lot of new names, just as far as education advocates in town that we didn't know existed, so I'm pretty excited to be working with that. And then there's some familiar names like the Kip Brady's of the world and people you'd expect to be out there cheering for education. So excited to start that work. I think it's going to be a really fun committee. So to be determined. What did we schedule?
Tentatively February 26th.
February 26th. So Dave was individually reaching out to all of 17, so I'm not sure if you got to them all, but we volunteered to help out if you get a little overwhelmed by that, so thanks.
Appreciate it, and, you know, appreciate that transition.
Yeah, thank you.
Good luck. 17, that's great, but again, you know, I just want to comment, you know, on how important it is to like the civic engagement and seeing people so involved, so interested, especially having a pair of students, and I think that's fantastic, so looking forward to that. Joint PCC, also?
Yep. Joint PCC met on January 7th at Pond Street. We had a great round table discussion about everything that's been happening through the fall, winter, and sort of what's coming up in the spring. Field trip planning is underway, booked at the middle school. I'm pretty sure booked at the elementary school as well, so some fun trips ahead. There were many teacher appreciation events held in December, and I just want to acknowledge some of our local contributors, Elizabeth Bagels and Muffin House, especially to our middle school teacher event. Were extremely generous, so thank you. Yearbook sales are underway, so be sure to get your orders in. I think I saw something for Lincoln Street personalization deadline is coming up the 30th, I want to say. Don't quote me on that, but just get your orders in. As a group, we reviewed, there's a new booking process for building use, so we reviewed that. And we also reviewed guidelines and parameters around fundraising for raffles and games of chance. The next JPC meeting is scheduled for March 4th at 6 o'clock. Just some notable things from the PCCs. There is a Washington Street K-5 PCC meeting scheduled for tomorrow night. Childcare is available. Otherwise, there is also a Google link, check Facebook. 7th grade social is on the 30th. Again, Panther Pride Night is the 29th from 6 to 8 at the high school for incoming 9th graders. And I just want to say kudos to all of the PCC members and administrators who are working closely with them. It has not been an easy undertaking. We are halfway through this year of change, and I just have to acknowledge all of the hard work and dedication that they've been put forth this year to getting these new communities underway and, you know, establishing these new traditions and cultures. So just thank you.
Appreciate it, thank you. SWAC?
SWAC, School Wellness Advisory Council Committee, whatever it is. We met on December 16th, and we hit upon 3 things. The first was that the group, and this kind of preceded my involvement, but we're required to do a triennial policy assessment. There's a tool for doing it. It seemed pretty straightforward. Colin handled most of it, and no changes to changes or updates to our wellness policies were identified as necessary, and we scored kind of above the threshold on about 80%, if I remember correctly, of the measures. So that, you know, that was pretty easy. We went over that and moved forward. SWAC operates in 2 groups. There's a nutrition subgroup and a physical activity subgroup. I joined the nutrition subgroup, and we talked about increasing food access through the weekend backpack program. That's primarily handled by Franklin Food Pantry. One of the things that we focused on, which I think is helpful to share with the community, is that what we've noticed is that there's a lot of use of it in elementary school, and then a sharp drop off in middle school, and almost no usage in high school. So we were talking about ways to bridge that gap, because our assumption is that the needs don't change, although there is a possibility that some students are just finding different ways to meet those food needs as they become more independent. But different things we were talking about was making sure that, and I think this is already established, but kind of reviewing, you know, if a middle school or high school student were to take advantage of the program, is there a way to get them the food and materials that you know, protects their social identity, and even delivering to middle and high school students through their younger siblings that are still in elementary school, where, you know, the elementary school can just pick it up through the office. And even thinking about delivery. through the food pantry to those homes. So a lot of really great options came up there, which was great to see. And we also spent a little bit of time on the local food sourcing initiatives in our schools, with some examples of how our chefs are handling those and how that is kind of translated into education in like nutritional education and civic education, community education, in terms of like, here's the farms where this food came from, and you're gonna recognize this town name. And it's on the map over there that we've marked with a picture of the farmers on it and so forth. And really kind of making food come to life for our students in a way that kind of makes it really visible. It makes it visible that this is not just something that shows up in front of you because we've got luxuries, but really kind of helping students understand all the dynamics of food service, food delivery, and how we as a society feed ourselves. The physical activity subgroup is working on goals related to movement through the school day. They have Wellness Wednesday initiatives that they're using to increase kind of movement efforts on those days, and they're are planning to introduce a Toolkit Tuesday idea at Franklin High, which is more focused on giving teachers more ideas about how to integrate movement into classroom experiences to help make sure that our students are getting the benefits of that movement, which is not just the exercise, but also increased focus, less distractibility, less likelihood to distract one another, because there are those opportunities to move around. Finally, they're working on brainstorming ways to design district meetings and daily routines that model movement through UDL, and exploring returns of initiatives like the Fit and Lit Challenge. And the Lit and Fit and Lit refers to literacy, so it is reading and movement combined. And that is my update for that committee. Our next meeting is next week, the 3rd. And if I may, Chair, I'll give the mental health and wellness update as well.
I want to actually jump in real quick on
Sure.
that. So something you mentioned there, talking about nutrition and working with the Franklin Food Pantry is something that has come up multiple times. Actually, when the Franklin Food Pantry was here last year, they did bring this up as well, and really the challenges that you highlight. I do know that, that program is very resource intensive, not just in donations, not just in finances, but also in human capital. So I was wondering if we could possibly explore with the community relations chair ways for us to engage as a school committee with the Franklin Food Pantry, either to help support some of those potential actions or just in general, recognizing that we might not be able to directly support other ways to get students the backpacks or other ways to make sure that they're getting that food, but that if we were able to support the Franklin Food Pantry in other ways, such as donating time or being able to support that, support them there, that we can essentially relieve pressure to allow other people to help continue to support the schools as they have. Again, very appreciative of their efforts, glad that we're having those conversations through SWAC, to make sure that we are creating this kind of continuous safety net for students where we can, and refusing to accept that, well, it's just not working. We actually are going out and trying to take that next step. But I would love to see it if we could find opportunities for us to all engage a little bit more directly there. So just a thought. And then now, yes, please, Mental Health and Wellbeing Task Force.
It's a brief update. The first meeting I will be involved with is tomorrow morning, and we're going to be getting a presentation from a couple of officers about student online engagement, or student online behavior. And Paul may be able to elaborate a little bit on what this may be, but if I understand correctly from minutes from the past meeting, the group's been working on addressing risky behavior online, how our students are dealing when they're interacting with like predators online or other bad actors online. And my understanding is that this presentation is related to that, but please correct me if I'm wrong.
It is partnering with the Franklin PD on how we can get awareness out there and police prevention as well.
Very good, thank you.
Excellent, thank you. So moving on to the consent agenda.
I recommend approval of the minutes from your January 13, 2026 meeting as detailed. I recommend acceptance of $2,760.72 for in-house enrichment as follows. Jostens, the mascot shop, $240.93. Grin and Barrett Enterprises Incorporated, $2,519.79. I recommend the acceptance of $6,000 for scholarships as follows. Thomas Wagner, $5,000. Roberta DeVagis Trahan, $1,000. I recommend approval of the request of Mary McMurray to take the music students to the Veterans Auditorium, Providence, Rhode Island, on May 22nd, 2026 as detailed. I recommend approval of the request of Catherine Naylor to take 4th and 5th graders to Robert Williams Zoo, Providence, Rhode Island, on May 29th, 2026 for grade 4, and on June 12th, 2026 for grade 5 as detailed. I recommend approval of the new student activity account Achieve as detailed. I recommend the acceptance of $1,100 from the FHS-PCC for supplemental supplies as detailed.
Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as detailed?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion, questions?
Just want to, for the scholarships, just Thomas and Roberta, thank you very much for these donations versus scholarships. Appreciate it.
All right. Seeing no others, vote will come on a motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right. Moving along, citizens' comments. Are there any citizens in the audience, in person or online, who would like to comment on an item that falls within the committee's purview? All right, moving along. Moving into new business.
Okay, new business, we have 2 updates for you. So there's a policy subcommittee next meeting from 6 to 7 on February 10th. Then we'll move into the open budget hearing, as we've already talked about today. And finally, Ms. Malati has a update on an opportunity for Chapter 70.
Yeah. So I did send out an email to all school committee members last week. We were able to secure a presentation with DESE about Chapter 70. Presentation will happen on March 18th during the town council meeting. So I am putting together a document with questions. So if you guys have any questions ahead of time, you can send them to Chair Griffith or myself, so we can include in a document and share with them in advance.
And it's here, it's in the council
Yeah, it's
chamber.
going to be in the council chambers, yeah.
And just to kind of clarify that, which I love, it's fantastic. Thank you very much for kind of, everybody who came on board to get that organized. So since that's going to be listed as a town council meeting, all the questions should be directed to you, because we as a school committee can't all kind of show up and start talking and asking questions ourselves.
I will check, but if we posted the meeting, you could all show up together, and then you could have opportunities to ask questions. And I think just to cover ourselves, I think we've done it before when we've had the joint meetings, we would post our own meeting that night, just to cover you all, so you don't break any open meeting law.
That would be wonderful.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So those are the new, pretty big business topics.
All right. So, finally, we will be adjourning to executive session, will not be returning to open meeting. Pursuant to National Law 30A, seems like 12 or 21-3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigation position of the public body and the chair so declares. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Okay, do I have a second? Second, okay. Any question or discussion on this?
Actually, before we move to executive session, I have one more item. I actually didn't notice earlier, good of the order is not on here, but I have something to bring up related to subcommittee business.
Okay. So yeah, let's just step back. We'll, do I have a motion to table this vote, just for formality?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Second. Vote on tabling the motion to enter executive session. Adjourn.
Yep.
All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion's tabled. Reese, what's up?
Yeah, my apologies. I want to, I've been thinking a lot about what Caroline Kuhnel shared with us last week. And so I just wanted to bring up and make a request that, in terms of policy committee, policy subcommittee, we make some kind of priority to bring technology policy to upcoming meetings, so we have a chance to talk about the information that she shared, reflect it against our current technology, our current policies as they apply to this kind of thing, and talk about how we may be able to address some of these concerns, because I think this was very well organized, very well thought out, and I think it really makes a lot of salient points that we would do well to discuss in policy and later bring to the committee as well. Thank you very much, and I apologize for interrupting the process.
I think that parents were really excited about this announcement, not to cite any of the other ones that were made tonight. But I found out this evening that the Summer Lifelong Learning Programs preview will be launched online on Thursday for anybody who's looking to view those programs, as registration is next week. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I got one thing too.
I'm glad we tabled that, that gives us all
I'm gonna
kinds
get
of
through it
flexibility.
very fast. I brought it up to policy already. There's a bill right now. The status of it is it's gone over to Ways and Means. I'll email it to all of you guys. I had brought it up to policy. I don't think there's a lot of time before it can possibly pass and get part of next year's budget. So what it does in the state is it adds 1% to every town's Chapter 70, and it specifically must be used for arts. It's a no-brainer. So from my perspective. So rather than just wait for it to get through committee and whatnot, if I'm just gonna send an email with the information about the bill. We can send a communal letter, but I'm gonna send one ASAP to try to influence that. So that's what that is when I send it to you all. It's just a bill. I'm not gonna influence your decision, but thank you.
Just one thing, last time I was trying to bring it, but because of the time constraint, we couldn't do that. Even the previous last town council, Councillor Karen Griffith also mentioned about the traffic issues in the Lincoln. So I was there, and then, I mean, it's not about the queue I'm talking about, it's about the rash driving on the roads, and even the school buses goes on the left side of the road, which is very dangerous, and that's something we might have to bring it to the town council when Vice Chair Callahan is there tomorrow. We might have to bring it to them and then seek some support from our police or some kind of regulations on that one, because it's so scary. If you want, I can share some videos. It's really scary. Which is, I wanted to bring it to the last school committee, but we couldn't get time for that. Sorry for the delay, but just wanted to bring it up. Thank you.
I do appreciate bringing that up, and I think we'll be able to have some follow-up. And we have engaged with town council. I know Superintendent Jaguar has also worked with our police and our resource officers in order to try and support more, and we'll continue to really explore that and provide updates. So
thank you.
Appreciate that. Okay. Good. For sure. Come on out. All right. So I'll entertain a motion to pull the tabled motion regarding entering executive session and adjourning from the table. So moved. Second?
Second.
All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. And then we enter into the vote on actually entering executive session and adjourning. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Good night, everyone.
We are now producing this in collaboration with Franklin TV and Franklin Public Radio. This podcast is my public service effort for Franklin, but we can't do it alone. We can always use your help. How can you help? If you can use the information that you find here, please tell your friends and neighbors. If you don't like something here, please let me know. Through this feedback loop, we can continue to make improvements. And I thank you for listening. For additional information, please visit franklinmatters.org. If you have questions or comments, you can reach me directly at suresteve@gmail.com. The music for the intro and exit was provided by Michael Clark and the group East of Shirley. The piece is titled Ernesto Mañana, copyright Michael Clark and Tintype Tunes in 2008, and used with their permission. I hope you enjoy. By the way, you can also subscribe and listen to Franklin Matters Radio on your favorite podcast app. Search in podcasts for Franklin Matters.